Well, hello, we're live here. It's Wednesday, August 5th, 6:54 p.m. What a great day. It's actually National Night Out, so I figured why not make another video? What else are you going to do? Well, but here we go. We're going to go into the depravity of this conversation and all the things that go along with that. So let me share my screen right here, and let's make sure it's not such a boring day, but it's um, a good one, basically. So here we go, and we're going to go over the questions again. And if you missed the last 6 episodes, it's time to readjust. So here we go. So let's see if we can find a notepad here. There we go. Of course, is about mass shootings. Once again, or mass casualties, the events that are really real, but always put you in the pickle of not doing anything about. So here we go. The first question we had here, which is the title of the video, obviously. Hopefully it doesn't stir. Just turn off your computer. Don't go online. The question is, can you convince people they are wrong or right about mass casualty events or mass shooter situations? Firstly, I mean, just like the last episode, we kind of left it on a tangent. You really seem like you would be involved with some sort of game warfare or racist, basically. Can you convince people that they are wrong or right? So I have a series of questions here. Obviously, you can see the list in front of me that go over some of the depravities of losing this train of thought. So you lose this train of thought, and it becomes a political schema in a way. You're kind of meeting means or meeting ways to kind of come up with abrupt questions, come up with uncertainty, come up with reasons. And it's the same on probably any side of the conversation. It just becomes unwielding. When somebody comes up to you with a question, says no, or comes up with a plentiful reason, as they put it, I'm anti-this, I'm anti, whatever it is. And you conceive the notion of I should listen to this person. And the other side kind of begs the argument saying, what happens to be wrong? What is wrong, right? Or what is the reality behind right or wrong? What's wrong and what's right? And anyone would ask this. Is something you would grow up to learn, right? So when somebody says, they're going to convince you, there would have to be a reason. There would have to be an absolutism, right? You're breaking apart from something that is real. Right? The realness or the reality is a relay that says, hey, it's life or death. It's about a situation that is manifested into something. A person who would need to solve it would need a detective, a police officer, a teacher, a firefighter, a professor, a student, a researcher, someone who runs a business, a small business owner, more than one business owner. Even the bad friend, the strayed friend who says, I made mistakes. And I'm not saying me, obviously, because I don't make mistakes like that, obviously. But, they will be in the underbelly of it, as though, they're struck into something. And one of those things, once you're in the underbelly, you might find, hey, it's not necessarily, a technical a solution or societal means, right? But once you're doing it, you might find, the tag-alongs you have are real. So, when you find that adjustment or you become territorial, that angst or that arrogance sometimes plays a role. And it's not the worst of the moments. It's not the best of the moments. It's real. But, sometimes you have to deal with it. You have to say, hey, I'm going to deal with my emotions today. I'm going to put it in a more structured way. I'm just going to handle my situation. Even if it's a blank mirror face, you've got to find a way to do it. Now, I guess this episode isn't really about, can you convince people that they are wrong or right in that way? But it is, in a way, right? When you have the tag along, when you have the emotion, the cloud on your back, the monkey on your back, whatever you want to call it, and they might not go together, and they probably don't all go together, right? But the reality is, hey, that thing for somebody is also a thing for somebody else, right? If I'm calling somebody else and directly, dialing whatever number and saying, hey, it doesn't really matter what I did, I'm going to do wrong anyways, or it's part of my lifestyle. Yeah, the other guy might say, no, I see you steal from the store, or I see you, do this and that from the store. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do. A lot of things you could make lies about, but when you tag along, you tag along for good. But when it's the system that's in play or interloping, I mean, sometimes it's hard. So, can you convince people they're wrong or right about mass casualty events or mass shooter situations? I think formally, right now, too difficult to solve. Right off the bat, we're like in 5 minutes or something like that. Already, I can answer that question. I can say, hey, what does that even mean? How are you an expert at that? Even if if your father was a 20-year combat intelligence officer or something like that. I mean, maybe a little bit more formal, but in reality, everything changes all the time. I mean, you just have to read technology. I mean, what would you read that a normal person can't read? It's, I mean, you could be the bad guy in the bad situation, turn the leaf, and you're the good guy now for everybody and all your friends, but you don't tell everybody, your story, you kind of keep hush hush, but you did the right thing anyways. But then one day you need somebody and they come along. The next person comes along. It's kind of like a sociology, or sociological business that keeps on running. And no one can't have that family business, but when the relationship, is you're jumping the hoop, but you're keeping it like as an underdog, like you're making sure everyone can go through. There are reasons for certain rules. I mean, exercises, it is in one of those things that people don't question. They do question it, right? So it might say like, hey, we have this person in place because they can run like very fast, or do this very fast, or like this other person can bike very fast, or do something else. Like, and there's people who don't do that, but I mean they might crawl very. And there's many things, and as you look at necessity and look at the adjustment of things like military, they've done that for a long time. But when it comes down to the training, the exercise, the priority you have, those are important. So I think most people would kind of adjust to that and kind of question that. But the other schema of looking at the social empathetic matters as like a refuge or a reference, right? Or, looking at cultural impact as a situational, maybe turning point. And something like this would be irrevocable. I said that word wrong. It would be a real life situation in which you need to find some sort of grounding, right? Irrevocable, right? So basically, you're working with time and against time to find a surmountable way to break it down. And I would say, like maybe in the evening, maybe the night, I mean, you have the choice, or maybe before lunch is another time for normal people, right? You clock in, you clock out, you clock in, you clock out. But the principle there is you still fall asleep. You still have somebody waking you up during the day, right? Maybe the guy who works at night, but it might be someone else, it might be someone in the office or something like that. So there's a principle in the curiosity bites the cat kind of thing, right? You're crooked if you believe in bad jokes and bad humor, but if there's no night out, if there's no night crime, you have nothing left, right? So you might be too interested in the salvation or solution of all time, 24-hour clockwork to answer this question. Can you convince people? Because why would you do such a thing? Why would you ask that question of like, why would you convince people to be wrong or right about it, right? I mean, that's the underlying saying, aren't you wrong or right always? Not just none of the time. You're an IOU away, right? Where you can all get caught up. But then you have the formal catch of like, what's the wall holding you back? If bad thing from a bad thing, I think as a young, adult, or even somebody who has never experienced such trauma before, when you look back at you, I mean, some people call it the monkey in the back, some people call it the ghost, but they might say, hey, when I have the reality of looking back, it's no longer the same anymore. I catch the IOU, I catch the wordsmith, the true and false. I always thought it was true. I mean, there was no crime, or I always thought it was false. But when you step in that accounting world, you step into the positivity of forensics. That's all you're doing. You're looking at numbers. You're looking at the sake of identity and that ego behind it. In some ways, maybe forensic rehabilitation in a way. So let's go on to these questions here, and we will try to answer every single sort of one of them. So, what a good day today. So the second question we have here, not to top all the other questions, should you be able to convince others people are going to die, maybe a mad kid or somebody else? I would think no. I would think no. I would think, obviously if force is obstructful, you stole, something, let's say you're an international criminal living in an international city and you're living in a crime ring and you do basically very bad things all the time and it's clear. Why not? Or yes, Why not? Well, probably because there's a law about it that says, interrogations are only verbal, and so therefore they are central. Like, they're centralist, right? Their ideas are basically based on idea of, demand, respect. There's plenty of things right there, but it's about the formal, confusion you give your opponent, or what you say, what you do, your actions, a lot of things. But the market is the other thing on the table. I mean, you're not saying things versus people or others. People are not segregated. But the fact is that when you go into this endorsement of interrogation, it might be a refuge. It might be not refusal. We would say interrogation is the basis of word. It's not word salad. It's an interrogation. Basically, you're talking to somebody. But the refuge or the reference point you're making are interrogable, right? So you're basically asking a question about something, a pretense, past tense, forward tense, but the relationship there is strong because the matters are confused, right? They're matters that are, not really making sense. They're not really allowable for people to kind of like, step into the bigger picture, basically. I mean, most laws, they might say, hey, interrogation, you need more than one person to kind of show there is a hobbyist in mind, showing that there's like, indeed, a ground foot or a game theory involved in this situation. I know they might say in the movies, they threw punches or some other thing. It's not really normal. I mean, that's very anti-normal, very non-real or non-supportive, right? That action is means for kind of like clauses of conversation of what is the framework, what is the conversation about. You creating a need or an escalation. It's also part of the interrogation, but except the part where you harm the physical part of them, it is digressive. So you always de-escalate the situation. If someone threw a punch at you, fall through with the punch. Make sure they don't hit you, right? Obviously, but then lean them in the opposite direction. I mean, it's just kind of fighting your opponent in a way that you don't physically meet demand. A lot of people get, I think, the de-escalation thing wrong, as though you de-escalate the situation to create a premise. You don't want to create a premise on the allowability of the conversation, obviously, which is a reaction to like an verbal skill or interrogation, if you will, from the other opponent. The rationality there is, if you have a lot of something like candy, or if you have a lot of something like oil, I mean, there's a lot of things you could have, but the absolute power comes to absolute control, and absolute control comes dirtiness, which is more money, more absolutism, right? So if one thing you do take away from it is that you can have control over order and operations, but you can't have control over social defiability. Meaning, like, if you were pretentively, finding a way to do something bad or dirty, as they put it, quote unquote, you kind of say, like, you're going to end up dirty and bad, right? So you do bad things, you invest in bad things, or bad things can happen, but they're at the reason of your own serendipity, right? So if you were planning it out, it's going to happen, right? It's not about the endeavor of drugs to slow you down, or the nagging of your addictions, as they put it, right? So let's go to the next question here. And I mean, obviously, a kid might say, why you're going to die, and I'm a mad kid, but it's not really rife with the situation. The addict might say you're going to die for what you believe in. Or, ex-police officer, who started Club Med 2 will say, hey, you're dead. But, the reality there is there are situations in which, there's a closed talk, a closed, idea, whatever you want to call it. But it's about, the simple part of communications and grounding, right? If you're open about the groundedness of communications, I mean, technically, at a young age, maybe, like if you're daring, but when you become an adult, that stuff just weighs down on you. You communicate everything is communicated. You don't fall back on the groundedness unless it's your choice of lifestyle. And yeah, that groundedness and that communication are pretty much tied together still. Just because they're kind of opposing doesn't mean they're central identities that are confused or something. They're real. You stay grounded, kind of like electrical engineer would be. You go green, right? So I mean, but if you are truly enticed into communication, you go blue in a way. But I mean, I don't see the spectrum working in the red color. It's like if you are with endeavor, like if you were looking for realization, that's one thing. But do they often do that? And what would be the opposing argument? Green. I mean, you're finding a way to find a solution, right? So you're opposing the actualization of something. But well, do you see that? They say like, oh, let's turn the tornado generator of a nuclear facility on, and it will go rife with the ground with nuclear ore. And so buy it for what the crops were doing this season, but we don't need it no more. So, it's embarrassing, stupid. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, if you were to say, hey, I'm half drunk and I'm a police officer, and like I chose this question, I chose that answer. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is, right? Why don't you go eat what you bought, eat what you said, and like do what you said? So I mean, if you felt like, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money off my property, I'm going to sell it to a nuclear plant. They're going to buy and sell that. I mean, why not? Or like I'm going to start ordering people around with doing the wrong thing, doing people dirty. Why not eat the food that's right next to the plant? I mean, the second question is like, why don't you eat the plant food? Well, why don't you eat it? California has like 90% of like agriculture. Maybe this is the part where people put you at your misery and they call you stupid or something. But you, I think, need to start learning the streets or something before you kind of touch tech again in the big world. So let's go into the next question here. I'm not made of limited questions. I'm not made of limited questions. I'm just kind of here. Do I teach you to learn, through my eyes? I mean, through this? I mean, are you a bad person? We'll go over it. Let's see. Can you convince people they are wrong or right about mass-casualty events or mass-casualty situation? Whatever that one. Here's the third one. Should all people who believe and think this way get grouped together? Maybe something happened to all these people one day and they believe what they believe. I mean, I think right off the foot, if I can remember when I was first taught in school, that is the golden rule, or do something right to other people, I would say yeah. But then you'd also learn as a kid, and you probably never relearn this thought. The secondary thought it would be about honesty or truth, but still this is a sticking question. I'd say people say, oh, you jumped to the conclusion. You jumped to the conclusion, right? So the possibility there is saying, hey, if you're grouped together, maybe something happened to all these people one day and they believe what they believe in, right? Like, you didn't say like, hey, like you were too mean to that guy, or like, oh, you get a prison now because you're too mean. Would you say that? Or did you say you did the honest truth and nothing but the truth? Right? When you held your hand against the Constitution of the United States, or whatever judgment you made to that Bible in that courthouse someday, or one day, I mean, I'm not sure if it was a funeral. I'm not sure if it was a simple interrogation of, your mindset before divorce or marriage, but, it might be considered cliche, right? If you don't respect honesty and truth, right? But the opposite is, is that a stigma if you broke free from the group reality at all and joined another group? I would say, kind of, yeah. I would say the principle there is, if you were in the group mentality and you were different or indifferent from other people, what does that mean exactly? You're indifferent from a rationalized outlook of something. You have one person, you have two people, you have three people. Your structure, your standards change, so your revelations change as well. Your structure changes for the better and greater. They say they fixed everything. They said, hey, we're a microscope company. I know you believe in God, but here's a microscope. And we took the new lens, the 100X, and we dipped it in oil, and it's safe. And you say like, oh, well, thank you very much. No, I don't have to worry about a broken chip. Microscope scope with a lens. And you're like, yeah. So the principle is kind of like, can you be grouped together in something? Well, yeah, if you have money is one thing. if you support, I mean, the Amish do that, right? The Amish, feel devalued a little. They work in the United States market. They produce United States goods for the greater good, right? No, yeah, but the policy or the thing that holds you together, isn't that one of those things, or the people that surround that policy, the situational, organizations? Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, if insurance can only be liable for so much, and certain laws can only represent, government citizens, or I'm sorry, government employees, where's the responsibility held for the people, right? And go to the World Bank or the UN and go to the food, bank, or go to an organization for the food support. Where's the straight, edge? I go from here to there. I guess that's the reality as well. But you see, like, there's questions of shifts in climate, so globalism. That's a question. That's technology within that globalism. That's logistics as well, planning and plotting and mapping, right? So a lot of outdated numbers there. Yeah, I would say, well, you didn't get really much closure for that business deal there. You're looking like you almost use free software sometimes. Still, the kids at school, you build an application, said, hey, it's free software, right? So the principle there stays the same, right? It says, hey, you're grouped together, but maybe we believed what we believed, right? So, there's a question, like, what would you believe in? You believe in change? You believe in the notion of principle, matters? So you're literally working on a map of, who is institutionalizing who, what you're doing for this and that. I mean, you sound like you're conspiring to kill, right? When you say like things like, oh, this person is a slave, or like this person is like, a bad guy or a bad person, or he's the N word, or he's the J word, or he's the S word or the C word, you gotta put it in the line of like, that's a group there. Or you can say like, hey, I mean, like, that's a group of a group. Yeah, that's the new think, or that's the new age strategy. You were in the new world, right? So the principle says, yeah, that makes a little bit of sense, right? We don't just group together as a mortality, right? We're not an immortality rate, right? But what if you were an immortality rate? I mean, if you're grouped together in the strategy and stress of your own liabilities, and you only took liability your whole life, would that make you immortal, or part of the morality schema going on? You become the adjustment between what you're doing and what you're going to do, and then what it represents. I mean, why wouldn't you already have this all settled out? Why would you believe in a liability at all if there could be a turn of events, or there could be a idealized strategy or struggle? Not the struggle, not the idealization, or not the strategy of. What about the principle of need, right? So if you needed something for so long and that liability was not covering that the whole time, there was a direct correlation. Would you say, yeah? I would probably say, yeah. So if you ask yourself, like, why are so many addicts, touching, products, right? And then the whole pandemic, they lock up the products so they don't get stolen. But what if there was the bread? What if there was the other bread, the cereal? What if there was the other stuff that you could touch with your hands physically, and you're like, oh no, I can't eat that now. There was a homeless man who touched it. What if you did, right? What if you question the fact, grocery store owner went and bought a drone, and he started, doing insane things in his emporium, and he decided to, go and cause one of these events, right? It's a sad story, but it's a real story, right? It's like asking like your mom, hey mom, are you gonna smoke weed when I go like drive to school tomorrow? And like, yeah, kid, I'm gonna smoke weed tomorrow. I mean, it's like, it sounds cool. It doesn't sound good, but like, no, does your mom smoke good weed? Like, does she go like to a organic place, or does she go to like, the guys with the trash bags out back in Mexico who sell her weed? Right. So you got to think like, yeah, there's some direct correlations there between, what's wrong, what's right. Or like kids like, oh, you got to get off the Coca-Cola. There's a direct correlation between cocaine and Coca-Cola and plus sugar. I'm like, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So there's a reference, for everything you do. Is a reference for everything you believe in. If it's bad, I guess, if that's what you've been brought up, and hopefully the system correlates that. So does that a group as well? Is bad guys, gangs, misconceived people a gang? It's a good question about typos, the part of your world. It's not just a ritual, like they say in sociology or criminology. It is beyond that. It's a whole indifference that you're creating a function for, right? Once you're exponential need, which once you're grouping this group think together, and it might be the thing itself to kind of conserve the energy or whatever you want to call it. Does consumable energy, that combusts, always, have the same square root? Never been proven, really. You might look at Gaussian theory, but I mean, it's never been proven, right? You might find a central purpose between something, chemicals and elements. I think that's more proven, but it's never been proven. But you have a realized, effort here of, if I drag, gasoline into my body, or if I drag, the idea of like, microwaves in the air and put them on my body, I'd say, yeah, well, you probably have the question here of like, you're probably making me so sick every day. There's that. So, when you're grouped together, you have a philosophy about you that says, I'm going to attribute something to something, or I'm going to contribute to something, and that's your day goes. I mean, as a volunteer, as a ritual, whatever you want to call it, a friendship, an outing, a government sponsor for threats or threat protocols. You probably say, hey, if one is one and one is even, why can agency belong to, one and one, right? But that's the rules. That's what we believe in. That's what got turned down. So the same system can turn it off. So you got to think about it like that. If you didn't have a way to log out, if you didn't have a way to turn off power, you probably say, hey, yeah, we don't all use the same power or things like that. That moment you had is just a moment, and you're probably either scared, or your moment is highness, or your moment is like, kind of like, as an interpreter, or a detective, or a forensic echo guy, who writes things down, sketchy. Like, oh, you didn't really fit the agenda. You interrupted, my profile here, right? So it is what it is. So let's go to the next question here. Obviously, because it's more of this or that. Let's see. Should all maybe something happened to all these people one day and they believe. Okay. What about closeness? Does this count when dealing with anything related to a mass casualty event like this? Should a story be different? Let's read the whole story again. What about closeness? Does that count when dealing with anything related to a mass casualty event like this? What about closeness? Okay, so the arrangement of this theory, this idea is about, like, is it 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 120 feet away? Is it 150, 1,000 feet away? Is it 1,101 feet away? Is it a number that does not exist for the point of exaggeration? I don't know. Was it technology? So, I mean, what does the closeness have to do with it? What is the closest? What about closeness does that count when dealing with anything related to a mass casualty event like this? Should a story be different? What about closeness does that count? Well, let's try to read it at least. What about closeness does that count when dealing? I should have added this. What about closeness does that count? What closeness? What about that counts when dealing with anything related to a mass shooting event? Like, what about closeness? I don't know. I mean, I would say like the closeness, like the nearness of the shooting or mass casualty event like that. Should the story be different? So I think we're going back to the general question here. So the closeness is like, being close to the victim, being close to the surrounding information, being close to the story. I think there's a lot of closeness here. This is anything. So I think the reality there is, particularly there's rules that say, oh, this person is a rule breaker, this person is a rule even, but there's no set rules that say, oh, hey, this is reality behind what you're believing in and what you're doing. You can't do that. And what about it says nothing, right? So I think potentially what we're looking at is a personal space and communication, right? If you're 3 feet away, 9 feet away, it's a little bit different. The reality there has a choice of revelation, but the closeness could have been a teacher, it could have been a girlfriend. It could have been a lot of things that pointed out to the necessity of the conversation. But the same for a liar. How do you spot a liar in a group of mass shooter questions or conversations? You'd say, well, yeah. I'd probably say right away, turn of events says, I'm sorry. We're going to have to work things out, more normally or naturally. I'd say, yeah, You're unwilling to supply, what I need, which is information about, a killing that happened. You'd say, yeah, well, yeah. You're like, I don't really prefer to hang out with you. I'm not going to pay you money, certainly. I mean, you sound like an addict. So, I mean, of course, according to the news, you sound like an addict, but I don't think normal people would say, oh, hey, addict, why didn't you give me that information about the homicide? That would be pretty abnormal. I mean, if you were a police officer, you'd say, yeah, I'm going to arrest you for extortion or trying to contempt the law. Or vagrancy. I think that fits under vagrancy still, as you're collecting information about the thorough point. The thorough point is like the point in which you're looking at indecently. You're a vagrant, right? You're finding a way to display your emotion. If you're not displaying the emotion, no, I don't think really people care because it's viral. It's viral still. So I mean, the idea of viral media or viralism, right? You get it from the disposition or like the hideaway, the point that's spacious, right? Those space, not spacious, but the reality there is, the strictness, the contract you hold, the NDA, it's all disclosure within the NDA of life, right? There's no non-disclosure agreement for nothing, right? No, the Earth has an NDA. You can create an NDA for the Earth right now, and the NDA will hold. Maybe if you're like a kid, or maybe you just forget. But the reality of the NDA, it can be for anything. You close your mind down. It might be different, right? But the idea of the NDA, it's kind of like your mom has cancer, or like your dad is like has broken bones, or like your son is like poor. But the reality, I mean, like a cop could have an NDA for something like that, but it's their contract of will. It's creating a will contract. But why would you do that? It's an important notice, right? So you having an NDA, ability, like having a contract or things like that would set you aside as a professional adult, especially, in the turn of events. I mean, it doesn't mean a lawyer, but I've seen better luck with like getting a document with a serial number saying, oh, this is an NDA agreement. Who would hack an NDA agreement that has a serial number? And you're like, oh, that's a good idea, Austin. Well, probably as I worked before and somebody stole a lot of my work credits. So I would probably know. So yeah, I would say something like that would help. An NDA agreement, situation where you have a serial number to it. I mean, I guess you just have a serial number product, basically. Can you get another one? I mean, you can get in a lot of things, but the reality of this or that, again, it's twofold, right? So I mean, you break that NDA barrier. It looks bad. I mean, you think weird thoughts, it looks bad. You start hurting people, it looks bad, right? But when you start abusing your power or lying about, it's beyond power, right? When you're talking about mass casualty, you're already abusing your power as like somebody within the vicinity of what they make it of being high, secret. I mean, you're being prejudiced, you're being racist, and there's a lot of things you're being, right? A lot of this gets played with gangs that might be from Mexico, might be from the United States. People you're working here and just think, oh, it's an alibi, right? It's my personal identity. Well, they might not think that way, but the reality is, hey, when you're higher than power, you're probably going to ask around, and you're going to find out you're going to be arrested pretty soon for thinking these thoughts. Yeah, same for anyone clean cut and saying like, oh, I'm Irish, I'm whatever, I'm Scottish. No one cares. If you're going to kill people, you're going to go to prison. If you're going to lie about things like that, you're going to do people dirty, you're going to do the government dirty, you're going to do the people dirty, you're going to go to prison for life. That doesn't matter. If you're a cop, if you're a director of an agency, you're going to go to prison for life. You believe in that. Let's go to the next question here. I mean, most likely you go to prison overall, but it doesn't say necessarily you believe in it. No, you're going to take handcuffs, maybe, and be put into contact or detained, and you're going to say, hey, we're going to question you about the validity of your statements, not about the integrity of it, the validity of your ideas, which are considered negotiations. You want something, and the other person had said something about a statement. It doesn't really conclusively mean you did somebody better because you said that. They said, oh, you made up a lie about something else. Oh, basically, we're not giving a sad look anymore. We're going to say like, oh, no, you're going to get detained for what you're doing. You're collecting information about segregated data, information about people who are was considered protected people. They are in a class that is protected by maybe their own safety. I mean, we're not talking about like just dead drop people. We're talking about like some people on like the worst, like the percents of lists that just don't go down like that. Those are strange questions. All right, so let's go on to the next question. Should all people think this finger put there? Should a story be different? I mean, yeah, no. I mean, the story of closeness. You say you're close to somebody. You say you're referencing somebody. You say something else. Should the story be different? I don't know. Is there a story at all if you've broken apart and kind of question this ethic or this reality? I would say yeah, a little bit. I would say like Murder She Wrote. You tried to let's say procreate, you tried to do something new. I'd say yeah, there is some sort of story and alibi maybe or some story behind it, but the relationship there would have to be second through people's ideas, right? So I think that's a bigger important thing. I think also the reality behind that says, hey, if my preconceived notion was to like let's say stop one of these, right? So if the question was like hypothetically, like, oh I did it in a mass shooting event, you really say like, oh no, I mean, there's no really real trouble, but you're asking the exercised right of what would it mean to say something that is more fragile than time. So there's that, but there's the creative idea that says that person doesn't know what they're talking about. But I mean, you can do anything. I mean, you can go to a place and you'd be so upset you hit the drugs. I mean, you don't know. I don't know. A lot of people do, maybe statementless things, and they don't always turn as brilliant as they might think. I think about anyone does it. Kids do it. Adults do it. I did today. I want to check the mailbox when no one delivered mail. I think it's normal. Let's see, but I mean at the same time it doesn't mean instances to be physically aggressive someone. Obviously that's the least of your worries, unless you can forensically do it. You're just looking at the person, what they're trying to accomplish, right? You're just asking questions. You can be supportively standing about to say like, oh, I'll watch out for someone. That's a bigger question. It's like, a relief or, question of like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting outside watching whatever for so long. I don't want to be here forever and ever and ever. That's a good question. It's like kind of saying like, oh, do you have views? And say like, oh, do you have views? So, I mean, you got, kids hooked on VPNs. You got people hooked on VPNs, adults hooked on VPNs. But do you have any spirit of what does it mean? What is going to be accomplished once you fix it or figure it out? I mean, there's just kind of like, why fix anything if you just can't? So I don't really know how to do it. Well, let's go to the next question here. Obviously, let's see. Let's see. Can drugs change the mindset of someone? How? Well, I say drugs can change the mindset of a controlling addict. The controlling part of them is the bigger part. Can it change it for like the worse? Will they become, victimized? Like, if they hit certain drugs, or if they be aggressive and very violent, that leads to very violent things. If they were, what is considered, if drugs had changed their minds, I would say probably no. I mean, chemicals are chemicals, obviously, and people are people. Their upbringing, their beliefs, the central beliefs of certain things, will help change them for better or worse. That might be sociological, that might be biological. But I mean, like you look at serial killers, you look at the rapport of somebody who's just kind of earning the idea of looking into something. We're living in a real world, we're not making up facts and things like that. Traditionally, you have something that is holding you together in a place, and I think a lot of people consider that school, secondary school, or high school. When people break away from that question, you're going to question it for life. They're going to end up questioning it for life. I'm going to say, oh, yes, there was a reason for the policy, the politeness, everything was in place for you. And obviously, the part of it is to branch out. You're not meant to just go and spend billions of dollars on college. It's not a necessity of human choice of recreation. It's really about finding an endearment for the community. How would you earn a job with $1 billion in debt? Like with $1 billion in debt, you're just looking at things that are unaffordable and that don't make real reasons so that she can work, so that she can obtain jobs. Is this considered a job right now? Do I make money from this job? I don't make money from this job, and I promise you're in some sort of delusion if you were thinking you're going to make money from this job. The reality of publication might be a little bit different, obviously, but the reality there is, you're doing it twofold. So therefore, that twofold is, it's basically suspicious. It's corrupt, right? It's absolute corruption is absolute power. So absolute power is absolute corruption. So if you're talking to a liability insurance guy, you might just be tied to your favorite publication route, right? But at the same time, what does he have? What does he own? He owns somebody's story that he controls. He lives through somebody else's ideas, basically. Those ideas are realities because they are maybe elusive. They're reasons to happen. But he tricked his mind so hard by making so much money that he believes that these things are his, really. We don't call it, the idea of meth, call it, other things. We call it, the frontierism, the frontierisms. Their beliefs that you had something so willful, so powerful that you believe in hurting others. This idea of listening to the idea of not killing people through the philosophy of writer or publication ideas or whatever social work you want to call it, history teacher, social welfare teacher, or the other one, political science, it's absurd. Basically, you creating an absurd obsession is one thing, but you finding a way to like work with the community or working with people is another. How would those stories happen? Murder, work, family, ethic. But when you come up with unrealities, it's just murder. Unreality is related to homicide. On the ideas that you do not have a reality are not just small crimes; they are huge crimes. Look at the identity of such and such a bad person, or such and such scene, like the news reporter, or whatever is making decisions in the news or in the environment. Whoever makes the policy environment overhead. Are they seclusive to the reasons you need support in life? So, I mean, if you have a reason to do something, you're already expressing yourself in a way. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened, hasn't been discussed. It just says, you have a reason not to do something, but you have a reason sometimes to believe in something, right? So it doesn't say like, once everything happens, it just turns into like a confetti. It just goes in crazy. It just like, it's here. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean like it goes like one way or the other. Or it doesn't mean like things have to have a reason for doing things. They have to have like a purpose. They have to have like a notice, an idea. Like little notes. Same thing. But the honest truth about it is like hey, if you distracted somebody enough, your parents, your uncle, whoever it is, kind of like I don't know everything, but I do know, that I need to support my community, maybe not community, but maybe support your idea, your mindset, what you're trying to accomplish, right? But the other thing is like, lowering the stamina, as they call it. This is the word stamina. You can write that one up, STAMIA. But it says, hey, we're not in mania. We're not in privilege. We're not in the question of voting. We're not in the idea of what we consider spatial recognition. The spatial recognition part, you're not going to learn it until like your third year of forensics or your brain science. You're going to say, hey, spacious recognition, or the idea is like when you were at the trauma point in your mind, you were in the trauma point and you're slipping from the emotion. The emotion of spatial recognition is when you take or engage the neuron in your brain. Spatial recognition is the part where you are maxing the maximum rate. It's not the 50th percentile. It's not when you go to the electronic store and the guy points out, oh, this is 50%, or this is the 50 millimeter or 55 millimeter lens. That's the human eye. We're at spatial recognition. That's the 100 point. That is the max it will go for your naked eye. Unless you have a lot of money and you have a lot of insurance to do that thing, there would be no other reason. But one thing that follows that is spatial recognition. Right. So when you compare spatial recognition to spatial recognition, does it just go together? If it's a part, does it just go together? No, because it's something you can count. It's something you can count for. And it's something that, a lot of people, vote out, and vote in. But why is it controlled? There's an entrance point all over the place, right? So spatial recognition is an important notice or novice in the AI world. It might be data science, it might be project management, IT development, it might be English, it might be science in every subject or all general subjects, or it might be based on STEM, or it might be based on it. But spatial recognition is one of those enduring facts of maybe art, of looking at revelation science, finding a way to support something through the means or quality of choice, right? It might be a mechanical need. It might be a spatial recognition for an institutionalization. But little do you hear that. There's a lot of segregation. And that's one of those, open tone facts that says, oh yeah, there's an agreement and there's no agreement, right? But a lot of people will believe what they believe. And they said, why don't I believe in spatial recognition? Well, it's time to wake up and say, spatial recognition is part of your endeavor. It's part of your mindset. It might be the fight, flight, or fear instinct that you've always been talking about. But when you look through glass, when you look and you very much try to do something, when you try to recognize the last moment, it might be the 100 on the wall, it might be the 99, the 98, the 97. You count it down to last second, basically. And when spatial recognition counts down, it doesn't click to a positive number, it's negative, right? It is your moment to move. It is your moment to recognize and realize and recall. The third part, recall part, is the part where you are basically finding a way to create the moment of action between something and something else. And there are other things besides spatial recognition, obviously, for that reason. But in a prepared way, where two frequencies meet or two reactions meet, that is usually what happens. Spatial recognition is a point in which you are, might be creating an obstacle or a reason for something in the system, an object to kind of be oriented. You're looking at, the fabricated numbers, ideas that are based on loose science, and then, ones that are based on, scaled systems, on things that people vote, people idealize, people have decided over time. These are reasons to do something that are just adjusted, sums, numbers, counted priorities. And the other one you might be thinking is like an exact line. It's a calculus measure that says, two in population, double the population plus one. You have a science that is meeting a demand, a deviation, and then a mean, right? But also, it doesn't say there is a demand and exact, quote. You don't have this value that says this is the value over here. We'll take the square root, and then we'll divide it or something, and it will become a positive number. That's lazy. That's laziness. When you take a population and a sample, put them together, and conclusively add a 1, we call that laziness. You got a U-Haul in the back, and there you go. So when you lazy decide to do something lazy, you're kind of like missing words. You're kind of missing the conversation. So if you ask yourself, if you're a kid and say, I want to be a big reader when I grow up, thank you very much. And you say, well, yeah, I want to be a reader, but not double. I want to be a reader that actually reads. I want to be a reader who reads science. I want to be a reader who doesn't always read books, but has the hope that I'm going to do something better, right? I'm going to have a finite reason, realization, effort, recall to believe in something. So you can't create a new word for everything, right? But it's just a part of the bigger question, right? If you put one thing in place, you kind of know. And that's a very good question. I mean, you might consider quoting, you might consider a reality sum, but when you look at product markets, there's no really easy way to just say there's effort in the world, right? So let's go on to the next question here. Can you simply change the conversation? And there we go again. If you're changing the conversation, there's plenty of things you can do, plenty of things you could create effort for, plenty of things you have. Find a way to create something new, something formulated in the world that says, hey, we have a reason to believe in what we're trying to accomplish, but it's not the real solution to what we're trying to disobey. When you're simply changing the conversation, you're changing it more than daylight, more than sundown. You're changing it more than wanting to be anything in the world. You want to be a detective. You're changing it, right? You're changing the conversation about everything you're trying to do. +1, +2, +3. You're counting numbers every day, single day. Just kind of like look at math, look at current facts, look at current ideas, and say, oh hey, this is what we believe in, and this is what I saw, and this is what I saw. But yeah, we made an agreement in formal. That's even one of those things, right? So if you have somebody out of line saying, oh, you don't have this or that, or like oh, you don't have tenure, and you're a professor, and you're like, oh, you don't have that, and I'm a professor. It's always getting in line. It's always getting a thought. And you're like, why would that get in thought related towards everything else? So look at the loss of life. Look at the power in which that quotient has. So, I mean, let's say you're missing one number. Does that mean you're missing one group, one attitude, one idea, one situation? Well, I would hope, if two bad things happened to two different people, but one person was gone from the situation, do you think you would be in 5th grade math or 11th grade math? Do you think you would be a sheriff? Do you think you would be an officer? Do you think you would be a account clerk? Do you think you would be someone who is interning a question? Or would you be a farmer, segregating data, saying, okay, here's your new farm crop, right? But the principle there is, you're looking at ideas. You're looking at, the ideas that, you can conclusively believe in, which is what somebody said. Their actions are, pre-verbal, because there's body language, obviously, or set language, as they put it. But then also you have, alternative willpower. But that's not, the end of the situation where you're kind of reading people because you believe in certain things. You don't have predisposed ideas. You don't have prejudices you can bring with you as a detective. As a professor, you're not supposed to do those things. As a teacher, you're not supposed to do that. As a fireman, you're not supposed to do that. Right? Why would you have a fireman who is in jail for drugs, who is a fireman who goes up the ranks and makes those decisions that are poor? The same as like, why do you have a fireman who bleeds or who burns the ground in front of him to get away from ground? It does not make sense. Your ideas are like kind of like is it critical? Is it insane? Is it unethical? Or is it uncorrespondent? It's kind of like listening to the song that says, oh, all things are painted yellow, all things are painted blue, all things are painted green. But are they? I don't think so. So, I mean, if you make a familiar face at someone that says like you're really related to that person, or like you make a familiar face and say like, oh, no, you're actually different than the other person, or you make a familiar face and you're like, I'm actually the person from your high school, and like I changed my mind, and this is actually what I look like nowadays. It really wouldn't matter too much. It would say like, hey, I have a necessity behind what I'm trying to accomplish or what I'm trying to do, but the policy or whatever I have accomplished is going to change anytime soon. Mad science versus super science, maybe, but the evil part of it is really real. It's saying, hey, I'm not going to go left or right on this. I'm not going to be real strict. I'm not going to be real liberal with you. You're a centralist. You just say, I'm here now and I'm here to help, right? There's no reason to kind of go, oh, I'm wasted. I'm going to become a senator. It doesn't work that way. There you go. You're going to get wasted and you're going to believe in being a better person. I mean, if that's what the conversation you're going to have, I mean, yeah, or, being organized or whatever you want to call it. But the reality there is not an improv too. Right. It's not about making up a mindset. It's about, not abusive power. It's about being very, very aggressive in a very aggressive territory, if that's what you believe in. But, as a centrist policy, you believe in saving people's lives. Right. If one turn of alcohol turns in one steering wheel turn, and one child who turned the bike wrong, and the one person who got hit by a car wrong, I mean, it doesn't work that way. One false statement doesn't always conclusively mean everything is false in life. Right. And just like one true statement isn't equal to one true drink, for one true spirit, for one true action, for one true idea, for one true love, for one true life, for one true sobriety, right? For one true soundness, for one true life or laugh, and then one true life or laugh for one true soul spirit, right? So the maze that you go on through, doesn't really add up. When you say, I have one right, way, of one right day, of one right song, of one right losslessness, or one right angle, or what one right tinge, or one right breakup, or one right start. So you got to see, if you were big in a big world, and you do big things, and you think big ideas, and you come up with big laughs, or big, choices, then you get big ideas and big, things back. So it's kind of like watching, Tom Hanks movie Big, but not really, right? Because we live in the modern day of 2026, and the world keeps on, restarting every day, as though, there's been the new homicide, and I want to hire the new actor who had no part in playing the action, but kids want to line up to get their autograph and say, hey, that's what it means. So there's that, or bon appetit, or whatever you want to call it, right? So let's go to the next question. And there you go. I changed the question, but I led to revelation, exaggeration, hyperbole, a personification, whatever you want to call it. Should there be absolute control like that of absolute power in the situations? Should there be absolute control? Should there be a reason to not start something again? Should there be a reason to believe in just pain going away and people being all right? How? So from what I can see is a lot of people who do that question, of who already know how to do that, pay a lot of people who don't money, a lot of people that don't do that at all. It could be scholarships, PhD programs, it could be business money. They just don't add up. They don't do much. You might get a little training from the start. You might get, the ability to do something, but someone says, you can't build an application without, it from the scratch. Nope, you have that on your Word document, right? Suite for Microsoft Word. You can build an application right now. Just watch some videos. You go into not Excel, you go into the other one, and you say, I didn't know I could build that with that application. Yeah, you can. You can do all of that. So the problem there is not a cost adjustment, just kind of corruption is what we consider corruption. We look at, the idea of this or that, but when you look at corruption on paper, you have to solve it on paper without evidence and support. You say, that guy was just an addict. He just had a drug addiction. Well, there you go. Or you said, he just ignored a mass murder, or he just ignored such and such, but he got Doctor of the World award. Or Doctor of the War award. It doesn't really mean anything when you come up with names for actions and reasons. So when you apply for a scholarship, expect to get an action name or meaning, right? Yeah. So you still pay tax, you still pay an IOU, you still come up with numbers and ideas, right? You are not frozen in time. You're not numberless. The scene behind me isn't frosty. It isn't about, being mean and sad. It's just about, you're frozen. You're there for a reason, and that's all you are. But the other side of the agenda is, you made money. You had an idea. It comes together. It's not just forensic. It is a support system that you're making with your time forever, ever. If you were a person who sold microchips to put in human bodies all the time, would you expect a scholarship? No. What about if you were a person who programmed all the time that didn't work? Would that make sense? Not really. What if you cooked drugs all the time? Do you expect a scholarship? No. If you worked at a coffee shop and exclusively said, hey, we don't really need the old stuff. Throw it all out, push it out of the building, and so this is the new stuff. Would you just get a scholarship? Maybe for certain reasons. The world could have been chaos and messed up. But what about the idea of you worked on the farm and everything is good on the farm or bad on the farm? It's pretty bad on the farm right now, and on the other farm or the farm before, it was still pretty good. There was a lot of crops. There was a lot of food. There wasn't nuclear, energy pouring out, but there somewhat was. So you can think about it like that, or you can say, you're the PhD almost student, but you did a pretty good job. You make a little bit of sense. You have the right over. You have the right of way. But yeah, yet again, you believe in mass shootings other people don't believe in. Do you think you should get the PhD? It's it don't matter. We'll fix it all. It don't work. So the reality there is what would you do if somebody after everything out, it all up, and what would you do then? Would you say, oh yeah, there's a way I can fix it, but who's got to fix it? Well, maybe, but maybe not. So, I mean, like in that situation, when you call Interpol and say, "Oh, I have a suspect here, Interpol. I called you on the phone. Why did you answer?" Or you call like the French police. Oh no, but would you know these people? Have you ever met them? Or would you say like, "Oh, I've met the president of them, or I've met the other president of them, or I've met the other president"? But, I mean, your story could be so exaggerated, but at the level you're at, you're kind of saying, "Oh, but now drugs isn't involved." Right? If the low level, police officer wasn't addicted to drugs and they were addicted to real life and they had real reasons to do what they were doing, and they're just playing it out, why don't they do it? Then question the fact of what order of material science are you looking at? So how would you remember the scores or the idea behind what you're saying? So first of all, the idea of like communication or like let's say groundedness or concerted efforts. They put these color codes on very basic things for very basic ideas. And the other side says like, oh, let's skip red. And we're talking about now red, we're taking a speck of red, one little pixel of red. Pixel, the smallest red you can find. I'm not saying like, we're going to hack red, we're not going to break red. And same for communication, but the smallest little pixel, or the groundedness, but the smallest pixel there. What do you think you mean when you put those together as you jump the stone? So you go direct to black and say, "Oh, this is oil," and I want you to have a speck of oil. That's me. Do you think that would make more sense? No. Do you think you would get a viewpoint if it said, "Oh, why wouldn't you type in speck of red and be able to get found on YouTube?" I don't know. Why aren't you found on YouTube if you turn your computer on and said, "Oh, this is a speck of red"? And then forever is it lost? So I mean, if you're the first one, is it going to be the first? Or when you're analyzing specks of red, would it just show up? I mean, so the question is like, if you're looking for new colors and it's not clear, it's not a computer generated color like gray. What would it matter? What would you care about? What color is there? Red? Is that the only other color? Red? Well, according to the screen, no, maybe. According to the other colors, I mean, not really. And there's yellow. There's other colors, but are they modern colors? Other colors you can't believe in or think about because you'll believe. I mean, so the principle there is, again, what is need? Maybe, right? I mean, if you have no non-need base need, what do you have at all? You have concentric, effort, favor, thoughtfulness, policy, but but again, you have the effect of something that never worked. It was built, it never worked. But think about it. If the contingency says, "Hey, that person manslaughtered that man," oh wow. See what I'm saying? Like you can't just walk away from the problem, right? So there's the problem. I mean, red doesn't do effort and all those favors without need, right? So red maybe it's a demon if that's the other color. Groundedness is not for murder. Communication is for conceited effort or concerted effort, which are completely different things, and those reasons are about collectiveness. So you see, like there's one ability or one segregated data that's going implementing the other data and saying, "Hey, we're light blue to dark blue, and we're the new blue people, and we're gonna find the way to decide everything, even though all the other communication efforts didn't make much sense. I'm the new color blue." It doesn't really work that way again, because it would create a conceited effort. It would cost too much money. The effort would be way too much. And then somebody would probably end up being pushed off the idea of communication altogether because it wouldn't be communicative anymore. It would be decentralized, or it would be, let's stay away from the word decentralized or depurposed. It would be about, conceited effort or concerted effort as a way to make a means to make money, or make a way to make and earn an effort towards something. And no one says it's groundedness, because you'll never find a groundedness person. There's no way you get addicted and find groundedness. There's no such a thing. So let's continue here. What is similar to a mass shooting or casualty event? Actually, let's see. Oh, should there be absolute control like that of absolute power in these situations? Groundedness, maybe you'd say absolute control. Communication, you'd always say, absolute control in a way, is then you have no other options. Your option is to communicate, create a pattern, and then create a visualization effect. Groundedness, you're looking at an error-free function, and you don't have the concerted effort to make something that is effortless, right? So your effort is now a grounding force between your protection, your means to live, right? You're only using self-defense for exact self-defense means and needs, right? Concerted effort for communication, you were not doing any of it. You were breaking the policy, the control of effort for anything underlying, that's radiating down, that's coming towards you or after you. You were communicating as an effort. It's a blank slate. You go down, you spin out with the other person. You were in peace mentality. Blue, peace mentality, right? So the principle there is your concerted effort is to stop and create a breakup within that reality or the finiteness, right? And the other color might be white. The central or obedience or the idea behind that is whiteness. And it might shake you down as the guiding light or the guiding principle. But favor over land, favor over reality, it might be considered like, going back to Vietnam, going back to Asia. What you make, what you have is not always what you make enough, right? What you see is not what you can see. So let's go to the next question. What is similar to a mass shooting or casualty event? That seems to fit the same criteria, mindset, quote unquote, or organization framework. However, is low level or altered reasoning that is not really going to hurt anybody. That's a tough one. Do you believe that there's something like that in the world? That is that's real. Do you believe that that there's a situation like where you could have a problem if basically the same criteria or mindset was there? I mean, not real. I mean, actually, yeah. I mean, I don't know. And so the organization framework says it's low level or altered reasoning that is not really going to hurt anybody. That's peddling. Basically, you're peddling things at low doses, low ideas to get it to consider that. You see it in sex trafficking or human trafficking all the time. So low level effort of the framework, organizational support. We don't call organizations. We don't use funny words. We use it. You were selling drugs to kids, to the belief system that your greater good or your greater opinion can start helping kids overall. You get hooked in the stuff. You're getting hooked, basically. You look at the criteria mindset of the organization that seem to fit the same idea. Yeah, I mean, if you can get hooked, why wouldn't you get hooked on the idea of a MS or a casualty event? Why wouldn't you? It's like kind of the red concerted effort, and you're like kind of like, why do you know it and I don't know it? Well, let's look at the effort here. So you have a positive reaction to anything. So add one to positive to anything, right? It's not the concerted effort of one. Because we're multiplying the effort, right? So we're looking at concerted effort, and it might take more math once you learn the skill, but that's a warning right there. So you might take the positive number and show it's not perfect, and you are having some sort of situational need, right? You're going to need to break apart from the irony or the symptom or the synonymous reason you're breaking or failing, which is you're proving yourself perfect, you're negative. The reality there is the perfect notion for resting the case, right? Because in a case based order or story, you're going to go turn into a criminal. If you start believing your ideas are perfect, man, you got something else for you. But I mean, there is the kid that can disprove it by never doing one wrong thing ever in the entire world in life, and that is ding ding ding. We don't got one. We don't know who that is. Is it a perfect person from a book? I don't know. Is it Jack Rabbit or is it Peter Pan? I don't know. Is there no Hook? Is it Captain Hook? I don't know. So considered effort or realized effort or whatever effort you learn and earn to break that potential and get it, that's what matters. So when you are low level, you're also showing that you are with that scale. You're low level. And what does that mean to low level? Well, it means 2 or less. Low level, and that's a good question too. If you're 2 or less, maybe 2 of 2. That exists. 2 of 2. That scale is actually safer than a measure of 4. So you got to think about it. Oh yeah, it is safer to look at 2 scales on 2 different tables Or two different reasons. That's a reason to do something, right? You have a reason to take off your tire by yourself with a DIY fix, protocol going on that says you cannot do that. Or like you're fixing your phone at home when you're not supposed to do that. There's certain reasons, like fixing a screen or non-suspicious reasons. So it's kind of been proven that freedom is a relationship, but freedom is also broken down into the reality: democracy, freedom, liberty, justice, right? So that frontier is like maybe the frontier of focus, or some might consider decentralization. I would be saying it's a bargaining chip towards it, but the idea of making something a marketable clause still has to fit the need of the consumer. They have to share a relationship, which is every little thing they're reading. If it's the network or the access that is not labeled, you have to label it. If it's an access that you have to label for an actual person to read, you have to label it. It doesn't have to be for organizational support. It just has to have a need. So the basis for that is altered reasoning, however, which says, it's not going to hurt anybody to say no for no is a no answer, but it says, if I have altered reasoning, which is, I have the relatability to do something double, it's also different. It's also indifferent. I wouldn't necessarily call it indifferent, but it is a real reason to kind of work through a reason to develop something. Before the car, there was obviously the bike. So there's a real reason to do that. So if there's a reason to do that, is there a reason to do other things? Yeah. But is there also a reason to go buy things overseas? Not really. So you're looking at a part of history that isn't really discovered as well as you might think. I would think so. You're looking at a fitness need that hasn't been developed in some way, a way to eat in a way that has not been meant. We're grocery store people. We are meant to go to grocery stores. We eat every day. We don't get served food like kings or queens or people like that. And if that habit has not been formed in a normalized way, well, maybe there's some correlation there between how you got from one to the other. That might be a part of the ritual part. You're finding a way to disdain from unhappiness. If the bad guy is defeated by the good guy all the time, of course, maybe they outcast the idea of ritualism and say, hey, you've been pronounced this for a day or for a week, but you've been pronounced this twice and you pronounce it 3 times. So, I mean, it's kind of as enrichment as possible. But the formalization is, there is some bad policy behind in iterative action, which is the action that is taking place towards something. That's how it works. Motion acceleration. People are always science people. They know how to throw their arm. They know how to throw the question. They know how to throw the answer. They know how to throw the big time result. So there you go. No matter what. And even if you put it in a bad way or a good way. So let's go to the next question, obviously. And here's the choices. So the next question here is, doesn't give you too much information, but overall we call it the grandfather rule. If the concerted force is a concerted reason, you have a concerted reason for the concerted example, which is a sample population, right? So the reason it's never been really proven before. I made a little video in my shorts about it, but the reason to develop something is a reason to develop something at all, right? So the reason to do that is there's a reason to measure, there's a reason to support a reason, hypothesis, an exchange of reason, there's plenty of things. So can only partial steps of victimization be heard on the radio? Oh, let's see. Yes, on the radio or song, like only one impression or scenario from someone who experiences this type of situation. I would say ask a musician. Literally, you have the chance to ask a musician. You have the chance to ask someone who's a national spokesman. Ask them why. Why do you believe, or why do you think? Do you think that some victimization can be heard and some victimization cannot be heard? Do you think that's correct? Do you think it's politically correct? And go maybe down a list where you don't have to. The one question says, can only partial steps of victimization be heard? Your political speech through radio or song. Someone might said long ago oh, our platform doesn't allow certain questions. This might be one of the questions that says, oh, are you allowed to say there's partial step, there's partial reasoning? You might call the guy a loser. You might call him and say, hey, that's a loser right there. That might be somebody who did something bad to you, or is planning, to lie to the public. What's the question about that? So I mean, if one impression is said in one, scenario from somebody who experienced it, so it's a love song about someone who died, maybe suicide, maybe something else. The question there is, it's a relief system of finding no tangibility between you and the support system is usually what will be said. A translation, communication translation, there is another question, right? So, can you love somebody who's a killer, right? Another question. Can you find a reason to write a song, play it over and over again? If it involves this history, this mass mindset. There's plenty of songs on the radio that are about this mad world. There's plenty of songs that are about deathful or experience that you just can't handle or you just can't experience again. They're awful. Deprivation is one of those songs. There's songs about water. There's songs about choice. There's songs about action. So when every action or every syllabus or what they might have considered back in the 90s or 80s asylum, said, hey, or every journalist story that says, hey, there's one purpose for this story. I'm gonna say I'm offended. I have more offense, than anyone. I'm a journalist, and I don't believe that there's a reality behind the victimization steps. I believe it covers the whole story. Someone from the shallow mindset will say, hey, no, we covered this mindset because it's the finesse of the situation. That's what is really the breaking point or the going over of the communication effort. We're finding a new way to find a lobbiness. So someone might also relate that to corruption. They say, hey, you sound like the guy who invested in that strategy to begin with. You sound like the guy who went to jail and did all those bad things. Maybe Jeffrey Epstein, maybe something else or someone else. But the reality there is you're looking at data that is collected by a business, and that business might be territorial, it might be corrupt, it might love people, it might love you a lot, it might say, hey, we love you a lot, but then we also have a reason for the best thing in the world. So I think that's important as well. I'll give them a shout out and say, hey, I'm here for staying, and I don't not want water, but I want what I got, and I want it now. So that might be the slogan, or the new kid on the block might say, no, it's me. Or the other kid might say, no, I'm the kid who's hooked. But there's no reason to say you could pick victimization, not victimization. But the question is, it's social identity, the integrity of the empathy of the song itself. Does it play to the heart? Does it play to the head? I mean, there's strengths in social biology. I mean, you can go over the list here, but you can also see there's a pinpoint, reaction for an action. That's an action of a reaction for an action to a reaction. That is an action full for a reaction to make a reaction that is an action. Right? It might sound crazy. It might sound stubborn. It might sound unsupportive, but that reasoning, just a statement like anything else, right? The more you say it, the more you start to believe it. But the more you believe it, also the more the statement is real. So there's that. So if you believe in nothing at all, and you believe in one thing, what do you believe in? So there's a question. There's a question here. Next question here. Should families of mass shooters be able to say no, deny DNA tests, or family trees for the public, or the disclosure of and for their families, extended families, or should their DNA be retained in CODIS-fed DNA program? Well, it's a huge question. When you look at the families of mass shooters and what they should be able to say no to, should they be able to say, hey, no, I'm the one, I'm not really caring for I don't care for that person. I don't care for the community. I don't care for the culture in the community. I don't believe in them, but at the same time, I don't have to give you information about relating my DNA to someone else. And you're kind of like, yeah, but that doesn't really make sense. I mean, how would you hide it that well? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Can you hide it that well? Can a social worker kind of or a court order and get your information? And you're like, yeah. You'd have to say yeah, but the honest question is Can you make a laugh and say, hey guys, I don't know if you know this, but like there's a guy with like the same last names as somebody else, but he's actually not related to that person. Like, does it happen? I mean, there's millions of people who died during World War II. Like, when we're talking 100 million people, that's a whole lot of people. Or like the question of like kind of like, you're an adult and you're not doing this. You're not believing in DNA tests now, or you're not believing in talking. Like, you don't want to talk to people. Like, of course, like you committed like the mass reasoning behind something we like to call like a mass casualty. The family member. Why did you do it? Like, so there's reasons for everything, but the reason like you have is to avoid it. Do you think good conduct will go out of it? Do you think you're having a very good time with it? I mean, do you have just very little money and like this is all you have to conclusively do? I mean, like, does it matter to say it out loud? But the question also says, like, if liberal things and all liberal things are liberal, like, should they be behind the line there? Should the murderer, or should they be the victim, or should they be the cop in the situation? It's criminal basically to ask that question in a way. I mean, the idea of like, loitering, I mean, there's many questions, but the depravity almost seems like a humor, like an episode of humor someone had. Why deny the facts through a law? Why would there not be a law at all that says you cannot deny DNA tests for your family tree who had been and committed a mass atrocity? But then you go and say, like, ancestry.com, will you be willing to host it? I'm the CODIS, webmaster. Will you be willing to host the ancestry.com DNA through CODIS? Like, yes. Probably would not really work that way. So, in principle, it says like, if they were compared together, would you see like, they're an oven and they're baking things like an oven, or like, like I took the guy's advice and like, it was private data, it was liable data, and it was secret data. Would it be secret data? would the quality of life be different if you learned that like you were truly related and enchanted by a killer in your surroundings? I don't know. Like, were you too young when you joined the FBI and like, they didn't give you the right answers? Like, you didn't look for the right answers when you were the recruit, when you were like, the like stage like director. Did they not give you the right answers? I mean, look at the quality of life of victims. Right? If no one knew, the segregated, and we went over like some of the identity problems, some of the reality problems behind the mass shooters, like awareness, or the victim's awareness. What is the discipline they're trying to like create? Is all corruption absolute corruption, and DNA is segregated? I mean, I guess if you're like white power movement member, and then people say like, oh no, you don't have to be a white power member, you can be different. Yeah. Well, what if you're in a black power movement? What if you're in a gang? Little do you see these things anymore, but the more it happens, the more you're like, that sounds kind of realistic in the situation. Game Boy versus PSP, dude. Like, you're a whole different situation scenario. Maybe not the meanest person, maybe not the mean guy, but hey, um, when you work for free money, no, when you work for free for somebody, you might see it differently or something, or you might find something is hysterical, right? I mean, if you keep on a business that says, "Oh, I'm not going to pay anybody anything, I'm going to trick people to work," it might be worse. I think happy thoughts, happy people, are happy ideas. I think it's the most normal thing I've ever heard in my entire life. But when it comes to DNA, CODIS, and the idea, I mean, can you join a group? Can you deny the idea of academic mindset behind this? I mean, you might say, "Hey, I don't want to join the academic mindset of the mass shooting, victim awareness. This, I don't want to be the new person who goes and does what." I mean, there's a lot of questions you would have. An ability to do something. Would it be it? I mean, it's questionable. Maybe. Does it change your life? Maybe, maybe not. So let's say, hey, things are different now, and I've changed everything about me. I don't know. I mean, you can prove it. Maybe, can you prove it? Do you have your DNA kit for everything? I don't know if you do or not. But that would be crazy. That would be crazy. All right, let's go to the next question here. Because you have the lesser name as a person or company, do you represent these ideas, or are you liable? I don't think you're liable. If you are the idea, like, keeper of your family, are you liable? I don't really know. I mean, you might picture the smart one, the hard worker one that says, you're liable because you work the hardest and you solve the problems, or you solve the problems and you work the hardest, or something like that. What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, you went through school, you went through philosophy, you talked to people, you talked about your issues. I mean, it's not like a nudge. It's not a grudge. I mean, it's kind of just like, are you liable for your DNA? Is that what the question says? Like, are you now covered in like street clothes? Are you now covered in like, the color white? What does that mean? Because you represent something, your surname, and it has no formable meaning in your isolation as a person because of the wars, because of degenerization. Like, you're basically saying you're generalized, right? You're having the effort to not become a serf anymore, but keep your surname intact, and that's what matters. But they'll add, certain, like, decrees to your name, saying this is what you've earned today, this is what you believe in, this is what you're supporting, this is what your support is. I mean, it might sound like, you're coming out of, nothing to make nothing, or your nothing is making something. But also it says, hey, we'll change you before you change us. All right, so I mean, not because you're bad business, but because you're, like, being inappropriate. As a person or company, you represent these ideas, or are you liable? I mean, it's kind of like, you're working at, CVS, and that's my last name, CVS. And, like, I say, hey, I work at CVS, but we haven't have a contingent plan for, like, our family name change. Or, like, we're working at Albertsons, we're working at Myers. And our contingency is like, we did bad. Our sales were bad, and they did us bad. And we're working at Target, they did us bad, really bad. But, like, we don't actually have the any idea, right? It says, like, made in America on it, and like some of it says, we're not really made in America, we're made differently. Or it says, like, flip the sign over, it's all lowercase. Or like, flip the sign over, it's all could be made in America. But none of it says it. No one says, oh, hey, you represent these ideas, are you liable? No, it's fine print. Does it say liable for your last name? You were in this person's family? Are you liable? I would say, like, no. I would say the reason is, like, a theft ring, maybe. You sold this from that exact family member, but you were murderous in a way. You're contingent on murdering people. Your ideas are murderous. You plan on, like, it's the absolutism and non-absolutism. Is that a thing? No, it's been decreed by the Magna Carta. It's been around for hundreds of years. You talking like that is like saying, like, hey, you sophisticated slave, you owe me money. Like, no. People don't work that way. People work for a living. People don't show empathy through death. That's not normal behavior. People saying, they done one thing versus the other. That's wrong, right? I mean, it's wrong. It's wronging someone in a way. It's kind of like watching Shaun of the Dead and saying, like, I got red on me. I have a way to say, I'm forsaken. I have something, to go back on to hold me strong. Maybe the tree, they're tied to, or maybe somebody's home, I guess. But it's the idea in which, you find some survivability, some effort, some ethic. There's a lot of things there that will help you. Maybe in Irish culture or a British culture, if you are non-married, you might even wear, a silver ring and say, hey, I'm unwed, but I wear the silver ring just because. It doesn't mean you have to be religious. I mean, some religious do that, some religions don't do that technically. But the breaking point, or the conduct point, is finding or showing partnership within chival things, which are, bravery, honesty, and supportiveness, which go along with the absolutism in, the Bible, or, some sex religion, which is manhood, right, or womanhood in some way. That breaking point might be different a little bit for womanhood, as it is a way of growing into someone else you are not. Maybe men are a little bit different because they are a little bit different, but the reality there, they have some way to create checks and balances as well. But with a surname, it's a lost sport, it's a lost effort and ethic. You might go to history class and expect to get this given, to you, even at college level, you probably won't. You'll probably end up writing the story of the fiasco, which is the idea of the story. Every story in history is a story it's a story. It's teaching you something about history. It's a voice, basically. You can create a voice. Might be part of your history class. Say, oh, you created a voice for your history class. That's different than everyone else, right? And there you are. You're liable for your story. History perspectives win. Go watch Sean Green if you disagree. So, vision in my mind. So, let's go to the next question here. Can you make decisions on some data or some action or consequence value? Can you make decisions on it? I don't know. So, if you have no group that is embedded in the question of like making decisions, and no academic rigidity, whatever you want to call integrity, comes together for like a commitment, can you create decisions? Communication says no, you can't create a decision. You can play on the act, gather, and collect. And then you look at the empathy of groundedness. It says the same. Your social order, your civil ethic, or your conduct at a cultural level is significant and integrated in society. Your decisions on some data, some action, or consequence, or value are tuned or true to your normal narrative, your normal behavior, your normal spatialization, if you want to put it, your fight or fight context, your significant figures, what your values are, or your idea of your values. I suppose. I mean, they might say politicalness. They might say, "Oh, your values are the most important." That's a new decree as well. That's a new decree. Maybe globalism, global efforts have played roles in them, but their advancements of certain things. You find that certain these go into different trees that are patterns that are unlike scalable concerns for human rights. So when you ask a question, if you can make some decisions on the viability of consequence, some of the viability of data, or some of the throughput of value, you're looking at a escalation of data, but you're looking at the decentralization of it as well as a human effort and ethic, or effort and ethic. And I think that's the bigger question that you're having a way to translate or um, defy the reasoning of democracy or limited liability or limited liberty, right? And that's the actual question that is real in psychology. It might be real in sociology. It might be real in the ethic or the ethic nature of reality, as they put it. The solution is to go good, or to be cost effective, contrastic behavior paid. I mean, there's plenty of things. Capitalist would be almost explaining some data or some action or consequence or value. Supposed reason, supportive value, or supportive consequence is also a means to make a lot of things. Breaking points, a way to look at data. So, I mean, can you make decisions on it? I mean, that's a good question. I mean, what do you do with data once you have it? I mean, you have to build something, maybe build a paper. That's one decision you can make, to write a paper, as a maybe ninth grade geography teacher would say. As a person, you would say, hey, you can write a paper just like that, or write a paper but make it double, as somebody who's like a caseworker for international people, like smart people you'd hire, but they aren't very smart. Or you could say, hey, I have made a decision on the data or some action or consequence, and the value is we're going to be imperfect today. Or we'll say we'll hesitate on the perfect issue. I mean, that's the other question, right? Once you are imperfect, you want perfect, right? So who gets to make the decision? Does AR actually, or HR actually get to make the decision, or is it something new, improves? The idea is generalization. I think that's the most important nature about generalized data, is that you would have maybe not always a sample or example unless it was part of the generalization, but again, it would have to be something openly maybe discuss. Maybe that's one of the things, but the decision part is maybe questionable, because you're basically testing the system. You're basically finding an open way to look at numbers, look at strengths, and look at ideas to make those decisions. In something like a mass shooting or a mass shooter situation, do you ever look at data? Do you ever look at action or consequence or value? I mean, who do you report it to? Emergency services. I mean, I think that's the number one thing most people would do. They call 911, say this is that, but where are you? They'll say like, who are you? Like, oh, here's the non-emergency line, and you stay around for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, and they say, hey, can you make decisions on data? Was there a number that was pushed incorrectly? So, that it's not as simple as any weapon. You're not clicking three buttons on and accidentally hitting the go shoot people weapon, I think. But the reality there is, some data, some action, or some consequence or value, they're already important. They're already disheveled ideas. So I would think you would kind of have to make the decision to get out of the decision, which is to make the decision to call this a grouping, right? I think this is one of the grouping situations, but again, it would be about the fair spectacle of looking at data that is going together consciously, right? Kind of like looking at a fork and measures or scales or social effort and saying, oh yeah, this piece of paper didn't add up right, and says, well, this didn't look good, or saying some action was some sort of demeanor they had made, or it caused a problem, they smashed something or something. Or consequences, which are like looking at verbal actions, looking at verbal needs, looking at verbal constitutability, or looking at the narrative of what they're doing at work. And you don't skip consequence from working. Working is consequence. It's a consequence because it's the nature of what you're doing. It might be a negative point, but its consequence is always reflected. Consequence is reflective of your work style and structure. But the more you play in this idea of looking at nonsense numbers, nonsense ideas, the world will go around you, right? So the value of decisions based on that data also is segregated. So I mean, that's one of the things ethics wise you would say no to. In business, if you're counting some data or some values, it would be unethical to count the rest of the data, because the rest of the data would not necessarily mean all data is collective. You look at certain things that create measures between the data. I think that would be more important as well, which may consider values or the surmountable, realness, or the data actualization, which is like kind of looking at value. If one thing had one relationship to one thing, it has a relationship to the other thing. It has a relationship to the other thing. The master set of keys, right? If somebody dangles keys over your head all the time and says, "Oh, these are the keys they handle or they have over you," and they say, "Oh, hey, we have the keys, but they're connected to this data pool, and they're connected to that data pool, and they're connected to this data pool, but then the data pool is it's not there, and it's there, and it's this and this and that." No, they're all just connected to the right ones, pretty much. They're locked in numbers, locked into more numbers, and they have reasons to be there. There's blackout areas because numbers just don't add up, right? The pool is like, oh, it's the wrong, it's up here. No, it's just down in the other ones. Your name, your ID, other ones. So, what's that? Should you make decisions on it? I mean, first of all, I mean, you would probably have to talk to a lawyer. I mean, say like I'm looking at battery with the town, say, hey, my store could have this issue in the future with the police, or like you talk to a police officer, goes to your school or store. You kind of look it up on a computer, maybe your company policy, and say, hey, I'm looking at data and says, I have to release data somehow, or should I release data somehow? I mean, that's questionable. Hit the fast forward button. You can say like, okay, here's pictures, just screenshots, things like that. I don't know. It just depends on their software. I don't know either. There's school laws. There's laws about businesses. There's plenty of things. Yeah. So like, if you ask yourself, like, I don't allow water in my store, but I do all this stuff. I mean, you gotta think about like, yeah, that's all pretty real. You gotta start thinking about what you're doing. You can't lie about everything. All right. So let's go to the next question. Can you get repaid or reimbursed for studying information about a mass casualty event, reimbursed for working the scene of a red light or blackout areas, or areas with operations that go bad? Can you get repaid, reimbursed for that? Like your student or regular person, can you repaid or reimbursed? Probably not. Probably the seclusion there is like, you gotta walk away. But think about like, what's hot anyway, what's not hot. Like what's hot and what's not hot, like what's cool and what's not cool. I mean, people not using the computer cool, or like getting off the computer all the. I mean, I guess that's cool, but look at the world we live in. There's that. To stay competitive, would you do more research, do more effort, do more ethic, prepare more, as they put it? Or would you say, oh, no, I got it all. I have this and that's it. Or I'm not trying very much or very hard anymore. And it's kind of difficult to get through things. And it might be more difficult over time when it becomes more of a avoidant of certain things. And I say, yeah, like if I had the choice to get off Facebook, I'd probably just delete my Facebook account and say, "Yeah, we're done and done." But in reality, that's not good. But in reality, I mean, you might be able to do more. You don't get tracked down as much by foreign strangers, by strangers who want your bones. But in reality, again, if you got paid for it, I mean, would it be gift certificates? What would it be that would help you to help them help with the scene of the red light or blackout areas, or areas of operations like that? I mean, like kind of like like looking at any area at any time in any given moment, looking at it. But then also saying like, okay, why is that, or why with turn events is this different than it was before when they were doing? I mean, I'm kind of saying like, yeah, but then, or you're saying like, oh no, or oh, we don't do that, or why don't you do that, or like why is things different when they talk to you and not other people? I mean, it's a bummer, but it's true. Without like self-respect, without like a personal statement, maybe. I think they call it a vision statement if you're like you're running a business, or even you might consider it a vision statement. Who are you? What do you believe in this context or this ethic? So yeah, what is your vision statement about that? And so like yeah, but like let's say like the same baddie or the same goodie got like they got the job and they said, no, we wrote the vision statement for you and we don't want that one. We want this one. You know what I mean? So that's where you make the calls. That's where you say, oh, you got no choice. We got the baddie here, and they said, yeah, you're like planning this out. You're plotting the idea right here. You're a plotter. You're an attacker, whatever you want to call it. That's terrorist in a way. Is there a way to walk away from it? Is there a way to go away from it? Not really. There's no yet solution in the world that says, hey, we found a best way for you to social network the clues in which you're finding these ideas in which this person's about to kill and attack. I mean, right now, I mean, we're working on it. We're people, right? People working with the idea of no more dissolution. So let's go to the next question here. Oh, and there's more. Oh, there's plenty more questions. Nice. This could be like hours of time. Fun. All right. Why would you try so hard if this issue is so serious? Why would they simply not just apply for a job? Was the last one just to answer right then? Why don't you just take off and go to the concert? Why don't you just do everything you need to do? Why don't you just apply for the job and that'll be it? Oh, well, why don't you have a car? Well, why don't you, victim, have a leg? I have both my legs, obviously, but well, why don't you have an eye? So like the questions keep on going on and on and on and on and on and on, right? Well, what would that stop you? We have disability law. Oh, that's true. Well, how do you do something you can't do if you're already on a list that doesn't make sense? Is that serious, or is it more serious to say, you're on the list now? Then we can argue all you want, but back in the third world country, they have a diplomat over there that says, I give out the license here, I give them out, or they say, oh no, I'm the diplomat of the streets, and I give out license, and I have the trash bags, right? So I mean, what do you do about something you don't do about? Watch them intently and say, hey, it's National Night Out. Raise a ladder for the National Night Out people, or say, oh no, I'm not a smoker. It's August 5th. I promise. There's no real reason behind why it's so serious and why it's so simple. Simply, you can't get a job. It might be the data. It might be race. It might be inclusive need. It might be the support for the outcasts in civilization or society. It might be quiet hours. It might be the need for a relationship between this data and normal data. It might be normal data because it's real, and what real is not real. But then who would make those decisions again? Who gets quietness if they don't get quietness? If you were a CIA employee and this all happened to you, how would things stay quiet for you? If you were a CIA employee and you just don't go overseas, how would it stay quiet for you? What would be more quiet than that? How would you be a CIA employee to do all that if everything's so quiet all the time? I don't know. Would you be an undercover working as a CIA employee? So, can you be required to volunteer even while off hours occur? Like, let's say you experience this shooting, and then basically you're required to work volunteer hours every 20 hours for 13 weeks or something like that, or like more than that, 26 weeks, 52 weeks, like for like 2 years or something. Or like they say, like, oh no, you were no longer allowed to work, and you have to work volunteer hours. Whew. Good thing that law has been passed in California now. Well, sort of. They might still require you to work as a service officer. I'm just saying as like working in the National Guard or like working in reserves. You're saying like your volunteer hours or off hours occur. Yeah, you're basically required to do that. But certain businesses won't allow you to require it. But if the security clearance comes around, or if you have to work certain places with the idea of working, yeah, we'll say yeah. You're required to work these hours. Can you be required to work? No, but they might fire you. They might do that. I mean, they might be upset. They might have poor planning. If they plan on the spot, that's usually the case. But if they're busy, messy, the business doesn't really run well, probably. Can they require you to volunteer? No, but it might be life or death. If that case happens, you write all about it. The new guy gets the job. The judge gets the job. I've been through more of these than anyone else, and says, no, you're required to volunteer. Mask murderer hidden behind a mask, basically. So, what do you think about that? I would think about it, right? So, who do you trust with your money as a voter? Who do you trust with, as whoever it is? Is that's who gets picked? You don't trust them for certain things. That's a good pick. You don't write those things down. You don't request them. They never they're not real. So, next question. Do you think most mass shooters live off of a tin can food to survive, or eat that to have a survival allowance? So what? So what if they take the cans and they stack them up and they push them down? So what? So what? They want to eat, tin can food, or they want to eat, food that's bad. The same as like for a victim. Like, so what? They want to eat that, go into shock from mental toxicity or the badness of the food, and then die. So what? So I mean, like, kind of like, do they do that? Do they not? Is there a revelation behind that? Is it actually more tin alloy than silver alloy, or more tin alloy versus alloy that's aluminum? I don't remember right now. But what about the food in there? Is it food survival? I'm sure you could just eat it a day and then it will be the best, or will it not be the best? I mean, there's a lot of questions that no, they don't go together, or do they go together? Tin can food, or the food of the tin can, is it going to get better, or is it going to get worse? So I mean, that I just kind of think it out once again. Is this better, or is this worse? Is this going to be worse if it is just that? I mean, why eat tin cans if you don't have to, right? But why get food if you don't have to? Why eat food if you can't? Yeah, tin cans. Then I mean, it doesn't really have anything to coincide with that. It just kind of has like sodium in it, and then the opposite of sodium or nitrates are like kind of like looking at like alcohol, like looking at alcohol that just kind of something you can throw up. You put alcohol down, you put a tin can of soup down, that maybe alcohol separates from the sodium, and then it just goes rise up, and then it becomes so much ethanol in your system, you vomit it basically. All the alcohol is on top, all the oils are on bottom. How do you flush it out? More sodium, maybe? I don't know. What would you do in that situation? Oh, I have an idea. What about minerals? I'm just joking. Obviously, that's probably bad because alcohol toxicity is just plain bad. But if your oil was there, you can't flush out the alcohol, and the oil has to turn, but the oil is sagging, so it kind of goes whoop, like that. The alcohol just doesn't do anything. What would you do? Maybe put sodium in your mouth, chew a sodium tablet, and then just let it float up or something. Maybe that. Maybe it's just that. Um, why? Let's see. Drugs, yeah, I don't know. Tin can drugs. I don't know any one of those, but I know talking to somebody who's using drugs sometimes helps to survive a monster because you can snap in a second. Sometimes. Let's go to the next question here. I'm sorry, not that. With this, so not perfect. God no. If more than one person was a victim, should any person be able to come forward at any time? Should they be able to outcast friends, put them aside, or say they know more about certain things than they do not? I don't know. Do you think that you should be able to get in front of a friend and say, "Hey," not naggingly, so like, or like, assertively, like as a friend would be, or obnoxiously, you'd say, "Hey, no, I I was the one who was the victim here, or I was the one that was a victim. Outcast him and let me, be the one put aside into the real place." Is it real? I mean, should you should you say like, "Hey, friend at church, like we have an FBI agent, job coming up, posting very come, and I think either you two are the best for." Would that be the best solution to reason? Would it be the choice that is an improv? I don't know. Or would the least experienced one say, "You need more training, sit"? Or can I say like, "Hey, I don't know if you've been through this before, but should you have the structure to decide what's good and wrong in this? Um, do you believe that you should be able to be more normal?" With great affirmation, then you would have a reason to get approval for something. I think is because it is it's important. It's important to have an affiliation with something. So if one person was a victim, you didn't have affirmation. You'd have something you fight for, right? I don't know. It might be disagreements. It might be agreements altogether. It might be not about being an outcast, but it should be about finding a solution that's honest, that has integrity. Why wouldn't you do that? If someone kept on bothering and asking you, wouldn't you do it, or wouldn't you say, "Yeah, I'm going to be sort of be honest"? No. When you say like, "Yeah, it's not really hypnotism," or it's not like being very aggressive or very dishonest. If it was a thing, but it would be about not sobriety. It would be about just normal behavior and attitudes. I would think that's a normal person would do. A normal person would say that because a normal person would only do those things. Maybe somebody from another country would say, "No, I don't really have the ability to make these ideas happen, or I don't have the ability to, manifest or come up with ideas for the solution." It's going to be like something that is inconclusive. Inconclusive, like meaning like you don't have a real reason, you don't have a real bias. There's no really real effort or concern about it, or there's no relatability for it. It's inconclusive, saying it doesn't mean it's negative or positive, but it is a moment saying like, I owe you. We'll have to get back to it, but it does mean that there has to be some sort of honesty on both sides, or both sides of strategy, story, structure. A lot of it is the more important thing. that holds a conversation together. In principle, it means that if more than one victim came together and looked at the truth and looked at the honest answer, you'd say like, yeah, these are the reasons they're honest truths, and these are the reasons there are honest ways to go about things on it, or find a way to do them, right? You saying 50 questions a day, or saying I have a son who has 50 questions a day, or I have a brother who has 50 questions a day. I mean, there's not a lot of solutions behind something. You have to find a relationship between. It might be finding a group therapy. It might be finding something on a group to socialize with, or something like that. It might be a friend. It might be a family member, or something like that. Or it might be something newer, I guess, but you have to find a way to do it in a way. I can't say yes to everything. It's kind of like the law, right? Without that law in place, you don't have a law of privacy, effort, ethic, concern, negotiation power. I mean, there's plenty of things that are laws. They just don't, necessarily have that. They fit in different categories, like sections and things like that. Doesn't mean one individual is different from a business, right? So you think about it like that. But if you're looking for the intent of the answer, maybe just kind of think about it in a more appropriate way. You're in some sort of situation that says you've ignored something for years. They have reasons for that. You can come forward at any time and say like, hey, I have a reason for this, or I have a supportive reason. You can even write it on a piece of paper and say, hey, I have a reason for it. And it's even more seclusive. Or if you need help to balance the idea, without just the peace talking, you can find case managing, find somebody you can talk to. It's always there, but the real reasons about the real concerns are sometimes hidden in things that people might look at differently. They might say, hey, this is so different that you don't always have a reason or solution behind something. So it could be a reason all by itself. There's like a dozen reasons after that. But what you do know, I mean, it might take a fork for salad. It might take a spoon to eat. There are a lot of reasons to go live. Economy crashing, one of those things, right? So you're not 1,000 people. You don't have 1,000 eyes in your eyes. You don't have the need or necessity to deny someone true rights, true actions, or true health, right? Like if your membership extends towards like your family and it's the social funding, I mean, that's cool, but you get stuff in return. What you're expecting is like almost like an embezzlement scheme. You're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do, right? We don't just pocket funnel money and then go join territorial dispute. Look at a paper. That's all. That's the words you get in a territorial dispute. So over history argument. But there is a turning point, and then we'll turn around at any time and we'll say, hey, this is the dispute, but this was what happened, right? If I went to Afghanistan and I set up an ammonia lab so that people can clean the floors with ammonia, would that be good or bad? It would have a side project to kind of coincide for this or that, or this guy's in debt. The only way to go work in a chemical factory, chemical industry is to do this and do that. But then they're around a lot of arsenic, or a lot of the buildings are unsupported. I mean, you're questioning the idea of something that doesn't have effort, but you have to find some sort of reason, sanity, effort. Good or bad? I mean, is it good to get clean from arsenic? Is it good to have sea salt on you? I mean, there's a lot of questions about that, right? Normal behavior that should be normal, right? And everybody likes it. Some people like pine more than anybody else, but some people just like to clean it off for cleaning's sake. So like, if it's not clean enough, then it don't get clean enough for blood. I don't know. So it doesn't take a clean kitchen floor to make sure it's clean in the future, right? It just needs to be cleaned one time. So, or perhaps should they be able to report to one another based on contingency of strength and structure? So there you go. Peace is peace talk, right? That's kind of like how the slogan works. It's kind of like it's naive, but I mean it's really to the point. It can be put off, put on for some sort of accountability or structure. Peace talk could be anywhere, but we choose the way we choose it. We see overseen as some sort of point, but it could be overseen by some other contingency. If it's courts itself, it's liability. If it's showing your true character or message to the courts, why not any day? Why not any time? Right? So there you go. DNA tests and children during such an event, or the families of loved ones the only ones? There we go again. So, I mean, when you look at the DNA testing kits, I wrote an article back in the day in my political science class about how DNA tests were not able to go over the border to Palestine to test the strength of dead bodies or to test the bodies, basically, to see who they were, to identify them. They were given the choice. They weren't allowed to the border. They weren't allowed to have water. They weren't allowed to have food. A lot of concerned effort with that. And also made a small video about that. But the reality there, 60 seconds, right? The reality there is a lot of things going on. I mean, when you look at Israel, not everyone is from Israel. There's some people who were born there. They have relationships. They have citizenship there, and that's all they have. They get refugee status, and that's the same for Palestine. That's same for some people who had families in Palestine who lived in Israel and born in Israel, things like that. Can you escape it? You can't escape it exactly, but your relationship does say, you shouldn't just go kill people, right? You shouldn't be mad at people for life, but you can say it again and again and get angry at all times, right? So you just kind of have to walk it off and expect not to be executed. I don't know, because I would expect, the same exact response. I would say, hey, you don't kill me, I don't kill you, kind of thing, live, let live. But then, that's the escalation. That's the belief system, maybe someone in Jerusalem would hold, or someone in Israel compared to Palestine. Palestine would say, some Palestine would say, yeah, that's the same exact reason. But, the concerted idea there is, people have free will. I mean, democracy is one of those things. If you don't believe in democracy, it's an art and a half, right? Break it in half and, make some more out of it, right? So, I think as an American, I would say, yeah, absolutely. If you don't believe in democracy at this point in your life, then you should start to revelize on that idea. Communism is a broken-spirited monster that has total control of your life. It's a monopoly. It's a gambler. It's a hidden traitor all in one, and usually a liar. The people who have experiments with the idea of experimentation, which is like to survive or survivability, they don't deserve a place in society that way. You need to, move away from the idea of social matter, social responsibility, and that mindset, right? That's not what ethic or social matters are for. That's one of the free bases of democracy and capitalism. That's what branches away from Marxism. They say Marxism led to the USSR, but USSR ideas led to the murder of Nicholas III, or whatever it is. But the point of it is it doesn't take murder, it doesn't take killing to solve your problem. It takes a bow and arrow next to peace to get to an apple, right? Right. So I mean, there's that, but then the responsibility is also it's disheveled. Democracy is always going to be disheveled. You have to find a way to strengthen it, but people always, and surprisingly, go back to communism or socialism as a way to either mark it in half. And you'll see even the top professors say, "Oh, marking things in half is important." Right? John Green will say, "Oh, it's important to mark things in half. That's how your relief of the disease happened." Well, not exactly. Not if you believe in something you shouldn't believe in, right? So there's that. But then your social matters, communist, feats, right? Ideas of completing something, and then social matters, or like matters of concern of, or revelations. Right? Democracy or true democracy is a democracy that has one point that's connected to another. They just don't separate. One plot versus the other, right? One word democracy, the other word democracy. One word vote, the other word votes, right? Not ediracia asia, not no peace for no easy. It's about easy. It's about joy. It's about support. So a democracy is inclusive need for the support of humans, of things to work in the future, right? Not about alignment, not about power versus control, because that will overall equal out to a communist-like government. Socialist, not so much. Well, socialist as an impression, and the impression there is about an impassion for communism, Set distribution supplies based on the need that is found through people. People need to have an ideal, an adjustment. Checks and balances. We have the judicial, we have the executive branch. We have the legislative branch. Voting, who votes for what person, who votes for what executive, who votes for what judicial, kind of in policy, right? So it kind of holds itself together through the apparatus of learning, voting, education system, things like that. If that doesn't work, you go back to the tribal mentality and you look at what's wrong. Right? That's the mentality in which you're bringing with you the rest of your life. Right? The talk, though, the talk isn't cheap. No, the talk is very cheap, but the talk is now, as you put it, yeah. You don't have the C without the monster, right? So you don't have the C as without the monster. It's a lot of knock and say, you'll say, don't teach the child that. No, teach the child they'll die at sea if they don't believe there's a monster in the sea. So the next question here is, or perhaps would they be able to report to one another based on contingency, okay, DNA tests? So what about the families of DNA tests, going in and being able to be the one to report the DNA test? Are they able to do it if this is the only one that happened? I mean, there's child laws that say you can't really do that as well. So that's another question. But when you're testing the dead, that's a whole different question. You test the dead and it's life right there. But when you test, a child's DNA, I mean, it might be more private. Is one thing. You might just disagree on an ethics basis for the company. That's another. But if it's a child's death, it's different. Yeah, that's true. If it's all the money the family has, I think you need to rethink the contingency of your plan here to work with what you got. I think that's a very important notice. And I think, people want to learn more about it. And if you think that's the exponential need, we just got to look at the higher power at all times. I think, maybe it's drinking, maybe it's something, something else. Because most people who work, overtime, working these hours, I mean, yeah, food is quite expensive. And you can put it that way, but then, as well as, food is really bad in certain places of the world, or if food is so bad, they're paying you double to make food, because they're stealing. I mean, if you're going to look at it like in a contingency of a state-to-state basis, I think most Americans would starve if they didn't have the food, and I think most Californians would be very, very healthy, to be honest, or else, probably die. And no, not really. It doesn't take movie stars or Hollywood stars to do that. That's the segregation of data saying, there's a shout out saying, oh, no, State of California is very hard. No, it makes a lot of money. That makes so much money, they can censor the idea of them making money. We'll put it that way. They make a lot of money. And it's not just in taxes. They make a lot of money through investment in food and land. Very good. Yep, they're very, very, almost black rock wealthy. They're very, very wealthy state. Why is there so much contingency? Why is there so many bad things on Earth, right? I don't know. So what about fraternity tests? Should that be different? Yeah, so, I mean, if someone was having sex and, they were in the mass shooting and they didn't have a fraternity test, blank goes to blank and they never able to talk to that person ever again. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, some states, they require you to have a DNA test and you're in CODIS, like just roll the loitering. So it's as simple as that. But will you ever see the test information will ever be online? It won't. The potential of it, being within, you getting the money and getting a DNA test. Yeah, that's sober. That's sobriety. That's your test talking, saying, oh yes, you will have the DNA test and won't be there for a long time. But looking at the data and looking at your at least on money or your reliability, what did you vote for? What did you believe in? What did you say to that person when you believed in that vote? I mean, there's no answers except honest answers in that question. If that's what you're going to put in, if that was an unhonest question, then there's no hope to what you're trying to accomplish. It's like kind of meeting somebody at 50 years old and saying, hey, gosh, I didn't mean to, not get the DNA test, or like, oh, I didn't mean to go to prison line the whole time in prison line. Well, I mean, there is no sobriety or no situation in which you can't make a situation which you can't believe in. You could say, hey, I have husband, I'm married, and I never got a DNA test or something like that. But would it really matter at that point? Or no, excuse me, it would very much matter, because very much deep down inside you'd say, oh yes, it was very much an issue, or oh yes, it was very much such an issue that it would become problematic over time as an insanity reasoning, and there would be no sane reason behind it. So in a fraternity test in that situation, that's basically a criminal jurisdiction. There's a criminal jurisdiction there, and that's civil courts. There's criminal, and then there's civil courts. But then there's also, you would be detailed by the police, and they would put a protective order on you to keep you safe, basically. Or in that situation, they'd say, oh, we have to do it anyways because your ideas are criminal, basically. It's like saying to the courts, like, oh, this is like a sober party in my mind, who can take care of my child, basically. And if like you met a doctor who doesn't believe in that, give them the FBI their name now, write it down now, and then go report them now. There's no reason that person should be practicing medicine. That person should be practicing any form of medical, specialty. They should go to prison, or they should be reported to. They will lose their license. And if they start believing these things, that you can't report things to FBI and things like that, that person might be going away for time. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, so yeah, I mean, if you have enough reasons that are compliant, but then you look at the escalation of that situation, which is like looking at DNA that is not reliable or responsible. I mean, these ideas don't even make notice sense, right? I mean, you've stemmed an idea from a mass shooting to a child to life, living, versus the living of life versus certain things. I mean, that's not really disordered. It's kind of like, quality of life versus, being raised by, like, we wouldn't say that. We would say, like, this person is directly connected to a mass shooting. If you have an absolute system, which is, a figurative language or a name versus a number, would you create a symbology also behind the idea of a bad thing versus an idea behind a thing that is similar, right? So a variable is a variable. If one death is one death, one child's death is one death, one mass shooting death is one death. Do you see how there's a relatability behind the function of that? If you drove a bike versus you went on a bike is different than driving in a car, or, the same as like for running versus, walking. You walk, you're slow. You're fast running. You're jogging is kind of like, in the middle. But, when you find realities behind these things, they become unnecessary, gritful. There's no good word behind it. It's just absurd, basically. All right, let's go to the next question here. Who you approach, if you approach someone who was a victim or a hero, and how would you approach someone who was a victim or hero in the public and ask for something like an autograph? Well, collectively, you'd say, well, yeah, that's strange. I mean, not many people ask a victim for an autograph and start believing in the victim, do they? What about the hero? They say, oh, no, the hero is writing the story. Like, oh, the hero, I met the hero at an excellent, cool time on a mountain. We're going on a mountain voyage, and we were talking to this hero this whole time, and it got to us like, I didn't really start believing in certain things and certain means, but it became more relevant over time. That hero, told me a story about how much he tried, how hard it was, how different things were, and then he started telling me the truth. But the hero, I mean, in his story, he was the person who was the most support. It's kind of like turning on the radio and saying, like, I'm going to listen to, like, what's going on in the world, right? Like, this is what's going on in the world. I want to be the new person, if you were a new person, turning on the radio and saying, like, hey, I think, the emotion I have, the struggle I have is kind of like you. And I think it's different because, there isn't just one solution in the world. There isn't just, two solutions in the world. There isn't just three solutions in the world. There's a lot of solutions in the world. But, if it was, approaching the victim or the hero, just be nice to them. Say, hey, but, at the same time, the functionality or restriction leaves, right? They have privacy in mind. Their mind says on privacy. If everything changed because they approached them because they were a hero or they were a victim, would it completely change? Like you were in the Sandy Hook massacre. Like talk about your life. I would say that. I'd be like, that's the greatest thing you've done, sort of an organization to help kids out who have had struggles with this situation the whole life. That's the best right there. Or you're in Rain. That's the best. You started an organization to help domestic abuse survivors, or you know, you're in CMEC. Like that's the greatest. You were literally on the top of the line. You're helping kids out. I mean, like you work at the FBI. That's great. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard of my entire life. You work for the FBI. That's awesome. Like you're a doctor, like who treats like mass shooting victims. Like that's great. That's honest. That's the best thing I've ever heard. But like if you heard it, the opposite, you're a victim and you start telling truth after truth after truth. That's just real. Where's it at? If you're the hero in the situation, you believe in something that there's no hero situation for. Are you the top hero or the less hero? Who do you report to, right? Who speaks first, right? Who brings into the question of whose morality is more important? Is there a single solution for this question, right? The Marines might say, "Oh, no known solution," or if there's no what do they say even? It doesn't even apply to this. It doesn't sound like it applies to this at all. You might loop it in your head like it applies to it. I don't think it applies to it. Where are my subtitles on my computer? Why do you have all the computer equipment? Because you work in cybersecurity before the adults do to discuss questions about mass shootings? I don't think so. What about the reality of them? The good guy in the situation who was the hero of the story. Your ideas are sitting and fitting just like a mass shooter's would. But the NCMEC does a great job overall. Or the FBI's CIA show is the best show on TV. Or the way he went into that podcast was just brilliant, effortless, or it was the most effort, right? But the way he put into that situation, he changed his age, but the other guy put in the liability to make up false stories. It was completely different than what it was real. Or that man sold his pig farm to join the FBI. That's smart. Or that man over there, he had some good questions, but he directed the president to take care of the security himself, and it was just fine. Do you see there's an honest response and honest responsibility between those things? It doesn't mean it's not honest and work for. It does mean that there's honesty and integrity, and that's what holds those two together. So, you can't just say we started a fire with pure alcohol. Can you or do you say we started a fire with actual fuel? Yeah, you can make the fuel. Oh yeah, you can make bitterant from alcohol, and yeah, you can make nuclear nitrous from the tinge of not bronze, but the tinge of zinc and lead and copper with alcohol in it. Yeah, you made some nitrogen, right? Yeah, but why? Why did you want to make heavy nitrogen? What are you trying to accomplish when you do that? God, do you gotta pick ethanol instead of vodka or alcohol? Why? So the more you look into history, the more you'll learn that there's a certainty behind these principles, that there are not that many work sites in the world that just have large clumps of metal in them. It might be surprising that there are not many areas in the world either that just do that. This kind of works that way. But if you wanted to ask them for something, ask them for a joke, ask them for something more, but just kind of go with the reality, why? Why would you want the story? Why would you want the joke? Is it communication? Is it groundedness? Is it support solution? Just like anybody in any city, when you go up to somebody and say this is the necessary evil I need to make, just think it you're making the biggest gesture of the day, saying I'm comparing you to somebody else, and that's going. That's pretty loud. You're gonna tell me the exact whereabouts I am today, or are you gonna tell me the exact staging of who I am today? What I'm doing to stay protected, so my family can stay protected. Oh, whoa, don't mind me. Or oh, you brought up the situation again on a different time schedule today during a war that has never been fought before, through a war that's an exit war in which people left. Oh, that's crazy. You weren't paid for going into the war. That's crazy. All right, so let's go to the next question. How do you think a hero or victim should be asked out for lunch, dinner, or for a work meeting offer? Oh, let's say it's like an ordinary day. You're going about yourself, going about your time in your regular hometown with more than a million people. But overall, there's not that many million people. It's kind of like disorganized. People are doing certain things certain times. Certain people are not doing certain things certain times, and it's kind of like you just go straight. You're balanced. You're relaxed. You're doing your ideas. Not everything's the worry. Some life you live in. You just go straight. But you say, oh, there's that person, and they ask you a question like, oh, you're a victim, or you're the hero, and you're in public and kind of saying like, oh, can I get your autograph? Or like, oh, can I ask you out for just talking, or you'd say like, I'd like to talk to you, or like, oh, how are you? Those are normal. Or you say like, you're a true hero. Can I ask you out? And I always go back to the Camelot theory, or the Prince Arthur theory. You have the strong voice, you have the strong tone. You're going to pick up the sword from the down bunker down the hill in the cave, and you pick it up really strong and you go, ugh. But you're talking at the same time. You say, oh, how are you today? But you kind of speak it in a revelation type of language. I don't know if I can do it, except when I did first, it was kind of like, oh, how are you today? Or like, how are you? Or saying like, oh, that's not what she said. Something like that. But the principle says like, you're being asked out, don't be nonchalant, be as territorial as you want. Don't be abstract at all times. Don't put your cap on the left arm and say, hey, can I ask you out today? Or maybe like you as a person who's from out of the country and say like, Sonia, can I ask you out today? Maybe it would be more absurd than anything to have, ask a hero or a victim out who needs so much privacy, right? And go into the question like, yeah, that could be another abishit. That could be another thing about that. Like, don't ask people out who need so much privacy. I mean, maybe the privacy thing matters quite a bit, as the privacy part of it is total normalcy for someone in their culture, their relevancy. Then when they ask you out, you go out. Maybe you're supposed to get married or something like that. When they learn the secret, maybe that they get taken and their family gets taken because they know too much, or maybe they're gonna talk, or maybe they started talking, but maybe it's just because they knew you, or maybe because it leaves them in a situation that is insane. Maybe it's that. Maybe that's why certain public officers don't marry certain people overseas. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's something else. Who knows? But maybe more divorces come from people who are married overseas, from people who work in securities as well. So it is ironic sometimes, but sometimes it's less ironic. Maybe if it's the same culture, sometimes it is more real. But sometimes if you don't have an ideal, as can't be made always the most honest way. It's the most truth, right? Because it becomes more difficult. It becomes more paced, methodological. It becomes more unreasonable. So you get answers for things because it is harder to do. And it might be just kind of more difficult because it is not always the most pleasant solution. So therefore, it might leave you vulnerable. It might leave you also vulnerable because it finds you in a situation that might be more difficult for them to survive as well. Becomes more unethical or uncomfortable, or becomes more dissolute, right? Whether you like it, I mean, dissolute is not a word you commonly use, but it is kind of a word, kind of like dissolution, or dissolve, right? In business, dissolve, bye bye. We're at the last second of the last day, and this is the last idea, and that's it, guys. That's it. All right, so let's go to the next question here. It's about 9:16 p.m. It's not too late. Well, how many hours are we into this? Oh, we're in 2 hours, 22 minutes. Oh, nice. All right. So what about how should they integrate into society if there are unknowns? What about helping if there is a problem again? How should they integrate into society? So, like, you got into the shooting, you got in the shooting once. You go in there and says, "How do I integrate into society after the mass shooting? I saw this guy get killed, or kill a dozen people, or how do you integrate in society normally, right? How would you say, hey, I'm the victim here. I just saw another guy got shot in front of me. I connected the dots. This guy is connected to this guy. Does that mean paranoid, schizophrenic? What does that mean? But the reality there says, oh, something taunting. I'm training you to do something, right? You could be the next rookie cop. You just have to kind of stick in there, or I'm so tired. I ran my mile today. I'm a police officer. Oh wow, big bummer there. I don't know. What's the other question there? It's like kind of saying like no means yes and yes means no, or just because I did the honest thing means I'm the perfect person, or I'm the perfect person so it means the dishonest thing. I don't know. But when you integrate and there are unknowns, what is helping in the situation? Helping the situation is like nobody knows the answer, I guess. Like if the whole town leaves, if you're the only last survivor, or if you're in the age population to do certain things, does that leave you in a weird way to integrate into society? To know you're prefixed with the idea of death itself, like you are now like half dead or half awake, or like you're kind of numb to the idea. I would say, yeah, kind of. I mean, topically, I don't think an American market would even cover those ideas. Really, it would be more of an Australian one. They have pools of data that says, yeah, this is this and this is that. But when you look at the overturned data, you look at the situation you're looking in. When you're integrating into the society, you're looking at the question of not normal versus normal, imperfect versus perfect. There's reasons for it. I mean, exact this and exact that. I mean, makes you kind of worried. Sometimes it makes you kind of seclusively say, this is the identity of this and this is the identity of that. And that therefore is wrong and that is right, right? But when you look at it as a more marketable sense, I mean, you don't really have the touch and go of the situation because it is idealized, right? The more you idealize it, the more it becomes pain in your mind. The pain in your mind, seclusively, that's where they'll stop there and say, hey, we have heard enough, and that's enough of the situation. But it's about the segregation of data. It's about the ethic of fact, effort itself, right? Nothing is nothing. Something is something, right? So you get nothing out of nothing. There's no reason for talking about nothing. There's always no place to go with nothing. With something, or idealism at the number one peak, it's always spreading the culture of the number ones, right? Automatically people have been brainwashed into believing certain things. White power, black power, it might be the anthem, you speak. It might be the differences of culture, but power is power, right? Power might be segregation, but power is also even privilege. So when I say even privilege, it's kind of like almost a slang. You're finding even way to devise or create a way to attach to something, to make detachment of something. It's the same choice. You create equal power with equal structure. So civilization might say you have two, open things, input and output, but that is a created thing by people, right? People have created that. Animals have created that idea, input, output. When you have two, openings, are like two ways to overall see things, like chemicals or emotion or empathy turning points. The segregation of data becomes more tangible to maybe your living style, your family, a lot of things that become more normal over time, and that reason to live becomes more social and arrangement. So it goes into sociology, criminology basically covers that, right? So when you do find these unknowns and you are having trouble integrating society, you have to find a way to prove it as a social idealization, which is a revelation that says you're not going to be looking at things too differently. You're just kind of learning to realize the way to fit in, to socialize. But rarely do people just kind of fit in and socialize, right? But it is up to society to say, like, this is what we want funding for. And a lot of the time, people get the wrong idea. They think they're going to study forensic science, but they realize soon they're looking at the etiquette of things, the protective need of things. And that's to kind of see, where are the joints loose? Why are the people, head looking at the left side of the road, not the right hand side of the road? Or, like, why are the people looking straight in the street? There aren't real reasons, right? You're not a cartoon character. You're not an actor saying, "Hey, I'm just an actor. You look like a good actor." You don't say that. You don't say, you whisper, "Oh, he's crossing across the street." Well, he's crossing across the street. It doesn't work that way. You can make yourself like, look, you're like the strangest, craziest person out there, and it might be the only person that acts that way. But at the same time, there's a reality behind, or a reason behind, why you would say this versus why you'd say that. But however, there is a reason to say 2 and 2 equals 4, right? You drive a car, you have 4 wheels. Why not? Why not pick the fourth wheel, right? Even though you drive with 2 wheels, why not pick 4 wheels overall? So, do you have the money to do it? So, do you have the money, or do you have the work power? I mean, if you want to really go by the work power, you have the work power to mine on the metal plus the boundary of the earth. Maybe that's the limit there, as though the interval needs to be you can only mine for so much metal in the ground, buddy. We're the government. Or you can only mine for so much oil. I mean, yeah, I mean, your neighbor's plot is in the ground and it's going to collapse eventually if you mine too much oil. Yeah, or like you don't live in the desert anymore, but that pool extends to 200,000 miles up. Yeah, I mean, this rock solid in the ground, and that is Tretch. That Tretch you don't want to touch. But that Tretch will grow fertile land for at least 200,000 years. Now you got to think about it. If you find a way to do something to turn out inside, yeah, but you got to find a way, to kind of screw it in. I mean, basic math you're doing right here. So what about if you have more experience? You see it 1 time, you see it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. You see a mass shooting multiple times. Does it change you and change your life? You automatically know? Can you read somebody and say, "Hey, you've seen 17 mass shootings, haven't you?" Or say like, you've seen like plenty of mass shootings. You've seen multiple mass shootings, and you look like you've been in one more than once. Or like kind of like you've been a person. I'm a person. You've been a person who's been in this many things and that many times. That's crazy. I don't want to get the CEO and get me in trouble. He doesn't need to get me in trouble right now. I don't. Or like, oh yeah, like that's what that person said. They said, you've been in this, and I was in that, and I did that all to myself. There's a forte in it, I guess. Maybe on the outside world, there's a segregation. Go internal as well. I don't know. Also, is it elusive, right? I mean, as a younger person, would you say it's elusive when you experience, that many, or you talk to somebody like that, right? Is that elusive or not elusive? Well, correct me if I'm wrong. One score on the test is one score on the test. You don't take tests. Oh, no. So there you go, buddy. Life is only a game to game theory, and psychologists believe in only games. Or what about police? Oh, no. This isn't a game to a cop. There's no game to a cop. Oh no, we don't believe in games, but we do believe in running miles at a time. We believe in money all the time. We believe in a lot of wealthy things all the time, but we believe in, no games. We don't believe in tiredness. We don't believe in journalism. We're just people. So going to the last question here, and this is the last question for the night. If you can't read it, let me make sure you can see it now. Does music really calm this situation down? It is really because of money, or is it really because of money? There is a lack of resources, cannot improve. Let's go over that a little bit. Does music really calm the situation? Well, I mean, some people, they love music. They love music more than ever. I just put some music headphones on, and that's it. We're gonna put the music headphones on. We're done. We're done with the conversation. We're out of here. We're out of 500. Oh, it's already changed the isolation of the music. Oh my gosh, I got the new invention today. Everything's going better. Everything is better now. No, not exactly. I'm well connected, or I'm not well connected. It doesn't really matter the way you might say, yes, right? The connection shouldn't stop there, right? The connection should say, "Oh, hey, does music really calm the situation? Does it make it better?" And you might say, "Yeah." I mean, listening to music, listening to a narrative point of view might make it better. It might make it worse in some ways, stress you out too much. Too many times. You might say, hey, I can't listen to more music and I can't talk when I'm listening to headphones. Well, maybe not. Maybe you're a musician right now singing a song really loud, and it's just some of the best music you've ever heard in your life. And you can't keep the tears back from your face. Or maybe it's like you're not watching this live TV show right now, but it's going to be over very soon, and you'll be able to live stream it anytime you'd like. Or does the music really calm the situation down? Of calming the situation, I'm thinking it just might. If you play the song and you know the song by heart, and I mean by heart, and then you can play it every single day, even if you were a cast stunt double in the double story of your life, which was made up. But is it really because of the money, and is there a lack of resources things can't improve? I don't know. You tell me. Is there a utility list that can't be solved for first grader, for second grader, for third grader, for kindergartner? Right? Is there a reason you can't count the positive reaction or reasons that you want something based on something else? Right? So priority in life is empathy, emotional intelligence, one of them. Your vision statement. Is there a reason for lack of resources? Kind of real, yeah. Well, if you're not nice to people, if you're not doing the correct thing, is there correct order for things? Well, if you build something on top of something else, yeah. If you get into people's face, if you don't believe in the personal space, yeah. If you pretend to hate kids, and you pretend to believe that certain adults should die, and certain adults lied about everything they believe in, well, maybe. If you believe in nothing at all, why not believe in keeping safe? Why not believe in protecting others? Why not believe that you have met a challenge in your life that you need to face your fears about and solve? Right? If you were afraid of your own life, should you ask yourself, if you have no life, or should you ask yourself, you have a way to get better, or you have a way to, find your life again, your footprints, what you've done in your world? That is a hard question for any adult to ask. Should you find a way to ethically go back to your life? You've lost an identity and you're wondering if you can go back to your life. I mean, that's a whole question all by itself. It sounds like a younger me turning the leaves of the tree that says, hey, we have nothing here. But when you look at personal protection, look at uh, personal sanitation, whatever you want to call it. When you look at personal safety protection, you look at personal stress, personal strength, personal honesty. The reason you're there is the reason you're trying to get better. The reason you're there is the reason you're trying to not stay elusive, to stay within an emotion that can help you survive, right? But that is the easiest way to put it, right? That's the simplest way. You finding a way to try harder than anybody else, to stay honest, to stay on track with your prints of feet. That's what matters. But also the question of, like, if you're in the place, if you're in the area that everybody goes to, that is no one wants to be at, do you have true friends? Do you have true questions of like who your friends are, or do you always have the question of who your friends could be? Right? Is that really about the music? Is it really about the resources you cannot improve? Is it about the food you eat? Is it about the water you have? Right? So I mean, they're all emotional intelligence qualities of life. You saying emotional quality is different for water than it is for music, or it is for the lack of resources or food or shelter or clothing, doesn't make it always right. It doesn't always make it wrong. It doesn't always make it the real solution, the false solution. The solution that says liberty has always been liberty until now, and it's been created, or injustice has always been injustice until now it's been created. That's a hard point. That's a hardship you're going to have to surround yourself with the rest of your life, right? But the one relief you do know you might have is your basis for support, and that basis that keeps on that structure, which you will have to eventually ask yourself if it is safe. Right? Has it always been safe? Has it always been a surrounding in which you've been comfortable with, which you found love, true hope? faith, questionability of your human emotion, right? I think that's the biggest ritual in which you need to ask yourself about tradition. Do you believe, or ritual? It's the thing you need to question within your liberty, your ideas, your pursuit of happiness, that say, oh, yes, that's what emotional intelligence, that's what liberty, pursuit of justice is. That's what freedom, democracy means. You finding an honest answer for people living in the world, people trying to help in the world, people trying to do many things in the world that are for their own safekeeping, for their own lives, for many things. But with the other situation, the other leaf, the other question, is it good that you are limited to certain things? Are you good at limiting your potential? Are you limiting your ideas of freedom when you adjust to them? Right? Electricity is one of those things. Internet is one of those. Freedom of media is one of those things. But they're the most liberal things. They're the safest things because they're most liberal. Most liberal, they use the most technology, and they use the most technology because they run out all the other resources that are false. If everything was connected to something, it would always be connected to the access of freedom of speech, of liberty, of media, of access of files. I mean, so there it is. I mean, you're going on YouTube today, where any video channel is solving some sort of ultimatum between the community and now. It is solving much more than a dimension of who you are, what you're doing. You're using a computer resource, just like Bitcoin or Bitcoin to break intelligence. You're using YouTube or any stratosphere for video media sharing as a way to absorb the intelligence around you and to make it something new. And that's what it's for. It's freedom, effort, ethic at the fine-tuned principle of finding media support and finding a way to do something. It is at the grasp of your hands every day. So it might be something you need to think about. Maybe something you look at as a mass media questionnaire for a mass media class, or a class about constitutionalism or something like that. But mass media itself has many times over been reinvented. Just because now it's safe doesn't mean always it has been safe. This safe, right? At all times has it always been dismonitored, or you've been able to do whatever you want. No. Right now, it's not like that. In certain countries, maybe, probably not. It falls apart before it can get better because something has also fallen apart. Maybe lack of resources is one of those things, or lack of centralization and purpose. But then also, you ask yourself, why in the fragile mind, would you do that sort of thing? Why'd you mute the mic? Why'd you put the potential in there? Because there's no option. It's also material there, also need there, right? It's the basic, simple solution. The system, is mapping itself together through the energy you have in your blood and bones. It's just like a human. So I think that's pretty much all I'd like to share tonight. So don't let it, the bugs bite, or whatever you want to call it. It's 9:35 p.m. PST, Wednesday, August 5th. You have a good rest of your week. It's a Wednesday. Keep the light on.